And we have a slightly different configuration here today because of our previous meeting, so appreciate everyone's flexibility in working with us here. We've invited Mr. Paul Duerden, who's the arts manager for the Covey Center, the manager for the Covey Center for the Arts here in Provo, and who will offer our invocation. And then we're going to have him share with us for a few minutes some exciting things going on at the Covey Center. Paul?
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful for the opportunity we have this day of being able to meet together as a city council and to be able to discuss items that are pertinent to Provo City and its residents. We ask thee to please be here with us today and to help us to open our minds and our ideas and thoughts and creativity to best make the decisions that will impact those citizens that we represent. Father, we're grateful for the freedoms that we have and ask them to please help us to recognize those and keep those in the forefront of our mind at all times. These things we say in the name of Jesus Christ.
Amen. Amen.
A couple weeks ago, I was in a situation where Gary were both in the building with me, and I happened to turn to him and say that I needed to have a chance to come and fill you guys in on what goes on over in the Covey Center. So this is that couple of minutes. Mm-hmm. Great. What we've done is we've put together a report of what goes on over in the Covey Center. So all I'm going to do is just run through a few of the highlights. Anybody else in the room want a copy of this?
Yes.
What we've done in this report is we've taken a look at the last 5 years of what's going on in the Covey Center, then put in what we're doing this year, and then kind of some projections as to what we're looking forward to within the next 5 years. So things that the talking points, so to say, are the big blue letters. So I've made it real easy so that you can take a look at it at your leisure and figure out those things that are important to you. In the past 5 years, we have had over 500,000 people come through the Covey Center. That's a lot of people. That's about 6 football stadiums that have come through the Covey Center in that period of time. In that period of time, we started out with a $600,000 and some odd subsidy that was coming out of the general fund. From that time, we have reduced that to $335,000. But as we dug in to find out what other facilities were doing, we found that the average subsidy that was coming to arts facilities in the state of Utah was around $639,000. So we're operating at about half of what the other facilities in Utah. If you take it out to the Western United States, most of the facilities are running at about 1.3 million. So we feel we're doing extremely well. Other numbers, as we take a look at it and we remove Sundays and holidays and things like that, we're operating at about 86% of the days that are available. We have the Covey Center in use. So we're operating pretty high. What we dug down to is that most facilities are running at about 65%. So we feel we're getting a lot out of our facility.
And many of them include Sundays in there.
And most of those do include Sundays. Mm-hmm. They do include Sundays. The next section talks basically about the different areas that we have over in the Covey Center. In our main hall, we've done 760 performances in the past 5 years, equating to almost 400,000 people that have just come through the main hall area. Those have included large performances, small performances. What used to be the Mayor Series events that we had in there Styx, the Beach Boys, Foreigner, Stomp, some of those kind of performances. When I go to when I go to conferences and meetings with the other general managers throughout the state of Utah, Energy Solutions Arena, the Maverick Center, those kind of places, the question that always gets brought to me is, how are you doing in Provo what others in the state of Utah can't do? You're bringing in stuff that should be in big arenas. You're doing things that should be in big arenas. But we're putting them in the Covey Center.
Paul, is the 162 performances in 2015, is that scheduled or to date? Scheduled for 2015.
Where are you looking?
On
You're looking
the
at
main hall page. The main hall page. It says 162 performances in 2015. So that's what you have scheduled. Or is that to date?
I'm still not seeing where you're at.
So the bottom of the page.
That's how many performances we had last year.
And then
The way that this is broken down is the year refers to the 2014-15
so you're on the
season.
on the fiscal year that the city's on. Oh, I
Correct.
see. Okay.
Okay.
And that applies to your attendance numbers too. Then on the previous
Correct.
page. That's fiscal year. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So what I've done is I've broken down those numbers so that you can see by year what we're doing, how many people we're actually running through.
How do you answer that question you just proposed? How do we do it? Bring in those that should be in larger venues. Why?
How do we do it?
Why do we do it? How do we get that?
Um,
How do you answer them when they ask you that question?
That was something that was started when the building was first opened, because when I came over from BYU, I looked at the facility as a fine arts facility the same way that the Guion Concert Hall and the Fine Arts Center is up at BYU. But Mayor Billings at the time said, no, we want to go beyond that. And give me some money, we'll go beyond it. He did. Mayor Curtis has continued that. And with that capabilities, we're doing just exactly what nobody else can figure out how we do. Over the course of time, we've done 5 major productions on our main stage. Understand that a theatrical production normally takes anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks to produce. So that kind of moves us into the black box area. We created a black box that's in the upper level of the Covey Center. When you look at it, it says we've done 23 shows in the black box theater. It doesn't sound like a lot, but when you think about that in terms of it takes almost 2 to 3 months to put one up, that's a lot of shows. In addition to that, one of the things that one of our team drilled down and found out was that this black box that's in the Covey Center is actually the longest continuous running theater in Provo. Provo Theater Company's been around, but it moved from one location to another, and what we found is that the theater that we're running over in the Covey Center has been around the longest continuous running theater. Within those 23 shows, we've done 247 performances. We move into our art galleries. We have 3 art galleries in the building. Over the last 5 years, we've done 75 different exhibits in those 3 galleries. One's upstairs, one is downstairs, one is in the security area. Each month, a new art exhibit opens. And with that art exhibit on the first Friday of the month, we do an art stroll in conjunction with other arts facilities that are in downtown Provo. And we have figured that over the last 5 years that we've had almost 250,000 people that have gone through the facility just for those art strolls. That's a lot of people. Studios. When we first opened the building, we were in a position where the studios were rented by a lady who started out and eventually over a period of time built a business in our studio. And it reached a point that she was running a private business out of the Covey Center. So we gradually moved her into the private sector so that she was running her business at another location in Provo. In so doing, we have now restarted classes, and we have those classes that are rebuilding. But one of our prime things that we love to tout is this picture that's in the middle, Frequency, our a cappella group that you've all heard. Had the chance to go to Disneyland this year, and that's only going to continue to grow and get bigger. We've now moved into other areas where we're doing comedy, we're doing outside events, we have corporate workshops that come through. We move into this year. This year we're looking at a showcase series, which used to be titled the Mayor Series. We've just kind of reformatted that. This is really where our showcase performances come through. The Vienna Boys Choir, the Golden Dragon Acrobats of China. I just was in a meeting yesterday. We've got Ballet West coming down next year. We're still working on bringing the Utah Symphony in again this year. We've also launched into more community partnerships with groups that are already clientele in the building, but what we had to do is differentiate between somebody that's just coming in that's a mom and pop group and somebody that's coming in and trying to sell to the public. Utah Ballet Symphony, Utah Regional Ballet, Wasatch Chorale, those are groups that are actually trying to pull the public in, as opposed to just mom, dad, grandma, grandpa. And so we're partnering with them to create a community series so that we can help them sell tickets and help present that better. We're also partnering with a group out of Salt Lake. It's called the Excellence in Community Concert Series. It's been around for a few years. They want to now bring it down into Provo. We're working with them to bring that down here. These will be free concerts. We're going out to raise the funds in order to be able to do those as free concerts, but they highlight Utah artists and predominantly Utah County artists. You'll notice the picture that we have having here of Thurl Bailey. He's one of the artists we're trying to get in here. He's got a fabulous voice and he performs with a jazz group. The other is just clientele. Our black box season for this year, we're doing Sleepy Hollow. We're doing the Andrews Brothers, which will be a really fun show. We've got our classes, we've got our galleries going. We've got our brown bag concert series going.
So Paul, the classes, or do those go through the rec center? Did you sign up?
No, these are in the Covey Center.
Okay.
That which we do.
So you have your own
We have our own stuff going
system for signups and
Yeah, everything we do is located in our building.
okay.
How do you advertise through their book, or how do you advertise?
We advertise through the activity guide. We also do things through the paper. We do things, whatever means we can get out there. We do a lot of Facebook. We do a lot of online website things. We have posters and flyers and all the traditional banners and whatever else that we can get out. Now, in the last part, looking forward, this is where we see ourselves going in the next few years. We're looking to increase our funding by getting in more grants, by getting in more private donations, by partnering with groups like the Excellence in the Community series, where they're going to come in and actually help do the fundraising in order to be able to put the concerts in our building. The big one, we're looking for community partnerships. Currently, we've started partnerships with Google Fiber on movies outside. They're also coming to our brown bag. Coca-Cola's interested in dealing with what we're doing, partnership with the Excellence in Community. We're working on Sundance. A big thing, we'd love to become a part of the Sundance Film Festival. It's one of those things that we've been working on for quite a while, partnering with the Utah Symphony to be able to bring them down. So we're striving to get more partnerships We're working with the convention center to bring in groups like this group's coming in next March called Interculture. We'll have about 2,000 members of choirs from all over the world that will be descending on Provo. We'll be doing competition in our building because we're not quite big enough seating wise. They'll be holding their concerts up on BYU campus. We're partnering with BYU, with the Vienna Boys Choir. So we've got a lot of partnerships that we're building. Outreach programs, we're trying to get kids, our next generation of patrons, into our building. That was one of the things that we did with Stomp. We went out to Stomp. We went out when Stomp came in and brought in all of the 5th and 6th graders from all of the elementary schools around. An experience that most of them will never have again. We're looking to do those kind of partnerships. Our education, our own classes are going. The outdoor program, we started a comedy program on Friday and Saturday nights that's building. It's in our studio spaces right now, so that kicks that into use on the weekends. The last thing is that we're looking to keep current with the current technology. We need to keep going forward because as technology changes, it changes across all boards. And the more current we are with our technology, the better performances that we're able to give to the community. Last thing, we recognize, realize, and appreciate all the support that this group has given us. We really do appreciate it and know that you've been there. I want to make this a standing offer. I have put in all contracts that I have a dozen tickets for every single event that goes through the Covey Center, because we'd like you to know what's going on over there. At any point in time, please contact me. I will give you the tickets to come see the shows because I need you to see what we're doing and the quality and what we're putting out in the community. Any questions?
Well, thank you, Paul. We owe great thanks to you, and certainly owe it to you to see those performances as well. We'll make an effort to get there when we can.
Good.
Gary?
And I appreciate you talking about partnerships. What can we do? How can we help you develop partnerships? And what does that mean to develop a partnership? Actually, when you bring someone in, we're partnering with, you have to supply money, you have to supply space for practices if they're performing someplace else, or what does a partnership actually mean?
Well, it can be a combination of things. It can be money. For example, with Utah Symphony, Zion's Bank has paid for the fee for the Utah Symphony to come down, and then they've allowed us to keep half of the ticket sales, the other half goes to the symphony. We currently have the Alpine Community Theater in the building doing Mary Poppins. They will open this Friday, and they will run for the next month. We partnershiped with them, and the way that we've done that is when we set up the contract, I set it up in such a way that we're taking half rent, and they're going out and fundraising, and then in the end, we will both make sure that all of our expenses are paid on both sides, and whatever's left over from fundraising and ticket sales will split between the two of us. One of the things that we're looking to do, we're looking to this year start bringing in some more popular music groups and offering them the facility so that they come in. We both sell the event. An example, the band National Parks. We both go out and sell the performance, but then we split the gate. And so whatever we make is what goes towards our expenses, whatever.
So partnerships are creative, in other words.
Partnerships can be extremely creative.
Okay.
But that's the business that we're in, is creativity.
Well, thanks again, Paul. Appreciate your time and focus. Very helpful to have this report.
Thanks for the few minutes.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it.
And we'll see you this evening. I think you're doing a
You will see me
presentation.
this evening, and Mary Poppins, I think Mary Poppins is actually.
She'll be floating in.
She'll be full.
Great.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what they're providing, right, but I'm anticipating Mary
All
Poppins.
right, thanks. Thanks, Paul. If everyone's had a chance to review the minutes for our May 19th work meeting, I'll look for a motion to approve those minutes. Kim?
I just have one clarification under item 5, where it talks about the Wasatch Neighborhood Parking Program. It's the students attempt to park in this neighborhood because number 2 says stadium parking lot. Just for clarification, it should probably say the distance from Heritage Halls to the provided parking in the stadium parking lot. Something along those lines, just so they understand why it
That
depends.
means. Okay, great. Thank you. Any other changes or edits? Motion to approve? Okay,
So made.
in a second. Kim, those in favor? Great. That passes unanimously with Mr. Miller absent today. We'll move to our first agenda item then, and we welcome Larry Walters here today, who will lead a discussion with us on the budgeting for outcomes approach that Park City uses, and we'll learn more about that. Larry?
Thank
Thanks
you very
for being
much.
here.
It's a pleasure to be with you again. I sort of feel like this becomes an alumni meeting because all the presentations that I've seen so far have been former students, and I see Dixon just came in. So
Is Dixon a former student too? Not a very good one, but yes. I'm a former student. I don't think I ever took you though. I would remember you better. But
well, there's still opportunity.
Ask my wife. There's not.
Anyway, it's a great pleasure to be with you. And the budget committee has met, and the budget has been adopted for the next year. And as we sort of stepped back and had a conversation about where do we think the city needs to go next with its budget, we would suggest that it would be productive to have a conversation about the process we use as a council to set the budget. And with that in mind, I'd like to cover just 4 topics today. What do we mean by a best practice budget process? That's going to relate to the city's goals. So I wanted to review quickly the goals and the values and the long-term goals that Provo has identified. That will feed into a budgeting for outcomes process, and then we have some specific recommendations of where we would suggest the council goes next. So looking first of all at the best practices in budgeting. And this comes mostly from the Government Finance Officers Association. It has been used by a number of cities around the country and a number of professionals that come together. Essentially what it argues is that you need to take a long-term perspective, and that the budget allocation process should be tied to organizational goals, should focus on results, outcomes. It needs to involve and promote effective communication with stakeholders, and it needs to provide the appropriate incentives for management and employees. So this is, in very broad terms, this is what we're trying to do, is trying to say, okay, if we were to think long-term and think about the budget in terms of our specific goals and the kinds of things we want to accomplish in the city, what would that process look like? And I've just laid out a simple process here that starts with stakeholder input, identifies long-term goals, but for the most part, there'll be more goals than you can reasonably focus on in a short period of time. And so from that longer list of goals, we identify short-term goals. What do we want to accomplish in the next year or two? And then as we provide direction to the staff, we also identify what we would like to specifically accomplish. How will we know that we're making progress on those goals? And then the staff and the administration put together the budget that with a description of how that particular allocation will achieve or further those goals, comes back for review to the council, it's adopted, then it's implemented, and we make adjustments as necessary. So with that focus then on goal setting, where's Provo right now? Well, if we look at the general plan from 2009, you've identified, and I've given you a sheet. You should each have a one-page sheet that looks like this that has these values and goals taken directly out of the general plan, 2009. We've got 9 values: safety and security, protection of existing neighborhoods, growth, access, healthy, livable environment, economic development, caring atmosphere, beautiful and well-kept city, quality education. Those are the things that we value according to the general plan. For each of these values, then, the plan goes on and identifies a set of specific goals. In the case of safety and security, it has to do with creating and maintaining safe neighborhoods, educating residents about the law, promoting safety through urban design. Now, I'm not going to take time to go through all of these, but you have the list in front of you. But for each goal, there are anywhere from 2 to 6, or for each value, there are 2 to 6 goals articulated. And those become then, at least as of 2009, the long-term goals that the city has identified. Now, I recognize that since 2009, the city's also gone through the Vision 2030 process. And so one of the questions that we have as we look at this, are these still the appropriate long-term goals? They were last reviewed in 2009, that's 6 years ago. Things may have changed. The 2030 conversation may have changed. New things may have emerged. So are those still, do they still capture the long-term objectives that the city council has? Any initial thoughts on that? As you look through this list, does that still resonate? Do you think, oh wait, there was a 2030 goal that we really cared about that's not on this list?
I think there could be, these are sort of an umbrella for some of the 2030 that maybe get a little more specific. Like the conservation and protection of existing neighborhoods. There are some really great goals in 2030 that in regards to that. So I think they do sort of go hand in hand, but I think it would be helpful to, I know we're in the process, the staff's in the process of bringing forward some of our policies and compiling those. And I think it'd be helpful to look at the general plan, the Vision 2030, and council policies, and with all 3 of those, kind of see how they stack up and to be able to see what those goals, maybe some of those important things might emerge out of those 3 categories, I guess.
But is it fair to say that 2030 doesn't represent a radical departure?
Right, no,
Does it add anything that's radically different?
it adds education and healthcare,
Okay.
which are not included.
We didn't have education.
Oh, I guess they're in the
on
bottom,
here.
yeah, education.
Yeah,
So
education for all
healthcare,
citizens.
But it does add that component of it bringing in the school board and bringing in healthcare. Seems to be a little more specific than the
Okay.
general plan
Okay.
does.
And I think 2030 actually steps up almost a little bit higher than the general plan, in my opinion. I look at what 2030 has where we want to be way down the road, general, and then the general plan is the next step lower in my
Okay.
mind.
Okay.
But I don't see anything that's really conflicting.
Mayor, you had a comment.
Yeah, I think those were right on the head. There were 2 things in addition to the general plan that we were trying to accomplish. One was to be up at a higher level. We didn't always accomplish that, but that was the intent, is to be up at 30,000 feet, where the general plan was frequently down into the nitty-gritty neighborhoods and things. And the other was to cover things that were not even necessarily the city's preview, such as healthcare and some of those other issues, and to bring our community together to define those things beyond where the city's responsibilities.
Okay, great. So I think already we can see that if we're really going to identify the goals, we need to probably have another conversation or 2 to bring out 2030 and potentially other policies that the council has adopted, and say, okay, what are the full list of goals? But one of the things that we find in this is that on this list, there are 35 goals. 2030, I think, has at least that many. And that's too many. You can't build a coherent action plan for the next year or two around 35 goals. So the question would be then, what are the top priorities for the next couple of years? What does the council really see as what's the critical needs of the city over the next couple of years? And equally important, what progress do you want to see with regard to those priorities? Now, let me give you an example, because this now moves us in the direction of, once we've had that conversation, we've settled on the long-term goals, we've established what the short-term goals are, we have to figure out how to give direction to the staff.
Question,
Yes.
who is staff, what is staff?
Staff is anybody that doesn't have a seat as a city councilman. So
Okay, and so just, I think what Gary's coming is, our form of government, the council can't direct staff, it's the mayor, and so then so they can direct me.
okay, but if you're more comfortable putting administration in place of the word staff, I'm fine with that.
So again, I think it's just a semantics problem with the word direction. It needs to probably be termed as.
But somehow, we have to get the word to the people that are actually going to make proposals, budget proposals, about what the council wants to see them accomplish. And that brings us to the concept of budgeting for outcomes. And the process is fairly straightforward in concept. It becomes much more complicated and difficult when we're talking about an organization the size of Provo City. But essentially, the council sets priorities, identifies the outcomes they want to see achieved. The departments prepare budget proposals to meet those, to achieve those outcomes, and the proposals are then ranked based upon the contribution that they make to those proposals. Now let me talk about each of these in a little bit more detail. Setting priorities. And I've stolen this quote from Steve Covey, where he's talking about scheduling our time, but I think it applies equally well to scheduling our priorities. And we start with the short-term goals. Long-term goals are always in the background guiding what our conversations, but for the next budget cycle, we focus on the short-term goals and we identify a set of priorities. In this case, I've suggested maybe we group them in terms of these are the critical priorities, these are top priorities, these are high priorities, so there's some ranking among the priorities. Let me give you an example of this, and this comes from Park City. They've identified 4 goals for the next 2 years. Preserving and enhancing the natural environment, becoming a world-class multi-seasonal resort destination, having an inclusive community of diverse economic and the cultural opportunities, and responsive, cutting-edge, and effective government. With those goals in mind, they've identified 2 critical priorities. One has to do with affordable housing, the other one has to do with congestion. And I think we can see how, if you're going to be a world-class seasonal resort, dealing with the congestion is an important issue. If you want to have an inclusive community, for Park City, dealing with affordable housing is an issue. And so these become the top, the critical priorities in the next budget cycle, that they really want to see progress made on these 2 dimensions. Now, that's not to say that they've got 3 top priorities as well, around citizen involvement, historic preservation, and then they have 7 high priorities, and I didn't bother to list those. This is an example. This isn't Provo. But can you see that if it came down to making a choice in allocating budget funds, are we going to do something that's going to promote affordable housing, or are we going to go after historic preservation? Based on these priorities, we'd lean toward affordable housing. Ideally, you'd look for solutions that accomplish both, and Park City has been doing some of that. But establishing priorities like this then guides in how we make budget allocation decisions. Any questions on that?
Yeah, Larry, just are these council situations? I just look at that middle income and I just start to see, sometimes I know that in our council, at least me personally, I get involved in certain issues and all of a sudden between May and June, my budget becomes a priority. The budget becomes a priority for me as a council member, and sometimes I back off on some of those things. Are these actually council priorities that they said at the beginning of the year? Are they worked with the administration, or are they council?
If they have a different form of government, they have a council manager form of government.
So
It's a little bit different there.
right.
But yes, these are the goals established by the city council, the priorities established by the council, both on all three levels, including which category they fit in. And that's done midwinter sometime. And then the city manager and staff go off to, and I'll talk a little bit more about how they put the budget together. But yes, these are set by the council and reviewed each year.
And in the form of government is the administrator or the
Council manager.
council manager. He's part of that process.
Yeah.
And I assume, Larry, that those goals get more specific and actionable as well. Some of those seem like guiding principles to me, but certainly as a focus, we can see that. Very helpful.
That's a very good point, is that there are lots of ways that we might go about trying to reduce congestion, and which ones of those we're going to pay attention to. And that's where we start identifying the outcomes. What progress does the council want to see on in terms of the affordable housing, in terms of congestion, whatever the priorities are. We identify the desired outcomes. And these are the observable effects. We want to be able to go out and actually see the needle move on these particular items. So we have some fairly high level key indicators. We have the desired outcomes. So now when the administration goes and all the departments go to put the budget together, they have this specific list of what the goals are and what the top priorities are for the council and what the outcomes are that the council is looking for. And then the departments will actually bid for resources. They'll put together a proposal that says, okay, we're going to, given with this desired outcome in mind, we propose to undertake this activity. If we're talking about economic development, the airport may say, if you'll give us this much money, we can further economic development in the following ways. At the same time, the Covey Center may come in and say, if you want economic development, we need a vibrant arts activity downtown. So if you give us more money, this is what we're going to do. And both of those proposals then will be processed by the administration, placed on the table in front of the council, and you get to decide which one you think will do a better job of furthering that priority of economic development. But you've also operationalized it in a way that you'll know what you actually mean by that. And now this last point is useful as well. Part of this process contemplates that early on, the council will say, will begin to create pockets of money. We'll say, okay, we want to, this is our top priority. We want to spend about this kind of money on this general activity. Exactly how it gets spent, we're not sure yet, but about that kind of much money. This other priority is important, but it's not as important, so we're going to spend a different amount on that. But you have these rough allocations in mind so that as the budget gets put together, the administration receives the proposals, and they're scored on how well they achieve the council's priorities using criteria that are discussed and approved by the council. The administration's team then says, okay, we think these proposals will further this priority most effectively. They rank them based on that. We think this other set of proposals will further this other priority most effectively. They rank them based on that. And then, starting with the proposals that are ranked most highly, the city buys proposals until the revenue allocated to that priority has been allocated. So you may have a lot more for growth this year, less for access this year, more for safety this year, less for healthy environment. But these rough allocations are set out in advance based on the priorities that the council has discussed and established.
Larry, can I ask you a question about that then? Are you talking specific allocations out, or are you just saying we would like you to prioritize this? This is the council priority, and we would like to see how the administration comes back with their budget addressing this
That's a very good
priority.
question.
Because I called today to find out how much. I think we ought to have a little bit of walkable communities. We ought to work on our sidewalks here in Provo just a little bit. And I had no idea how much it cost for a linear foot of sidewalk. And as a council member, I'm not sure if we understand enough to say, okay, we're going to throw money at this. But if we throw a priority or our vision to the administration, say, deal with that. How we can deal
I have a
with that.
suggestion when we get to the recommendations on how to address that issue.
Okay.
It's a very legitimate question. So I want to come back to it and make sure that you at least understand our perspective on it. You can decide.
Okay.
But keep in mind the objective. The objective is to adopt a budget that has demonstrable results in terms of achieving the council's objectives and goals. So let's talk about our recommendation, because this is a generalized process that's been advocated by other people around the country. How it gets implemented in any given jurisdiction, there's often significant variation. As the Budget Committee has looked at Provo's situation, we have some specific recommendations on how to proceed. First one is, start with the goals. Review the long-term goals from the general plan of Vision 2030, make sure that those are the right ones. And then identify 3 to 5 short-term goals, things that you want to focus on for the next 2 years. And operationalize those goals in terms of the priorities. What are the critical, the top, the high priorities? You may want to have other categories as well, but there's some ranking of the priorities so that we know and can use that for guidance. Then we suggest that you ask the administration to work with the departments to determine how much we're currently spending on those goals, which gets to the question that I think that you raised, because at this point, as I look at the budget, I'm not sure we can tell how much is being spent on one of the goals that comes off this sheet. And I think that would be useful information for the council to have. Once you've got that information, then you can say, you know, I wish we could spend more on sidewalks. If we did, which of the priority categories would I be willing to see go down so that we can shift some more money into that? And what priority would better sidewalks or renewed sidewalks accomplish? So you can begin to make those rough allocations. You know, I'm willing to see a little bit less spent on animal control, a little more spent on sidewalks. You're not going to get very many sidewalks for what we spend on animal control. But okay, but that's the kind of the place to begin, I think, is to understand what our goals are and what we're now spending on the goals, and to review that allocation to see, do we want to make some adjustments in the next budget cycle? And then work with the administration to develop those desired outcomes and those key indicators. What progress do you want to be able to see in each of the areas? And then we suggest change your budget calendar. Now, with regard to the budget calendar, this is what we suggest, that you start in January with a review, a retreat that reviews the short-term goals and establishes the priorities. That in February, you ask John and Denise to come in with their 10-year forecast of, you know, what the revenues are going to look like, what the debt service obligations are going to be, what are the other encumbrances that we already have to, that we know about. And then the council establishes the spending priorities. Let's take a little bit of money from this area where we're now spending it and move it into this other area that seems to be a higher priority. Again, broad categories, but at least you have some sense of how things might be reallocated. In February and March, then, the departments prepare their proposals. In April, the administration reviews and ranks those proposals, and in May, you receive the budget. But what you'll be receiving in addition to, here's how much we propose to spend and how many people we're going to hire, this is what we're going to accomplish. These are the outcomes we plan to achieve that will further your goals as articulated earlier in the year. So that's the kind of change that we would suggest you consider in the budget calendar. There are some additional suggestions. We think you should consider moving to a 2-year budget cycle. Now, obviously you have to adopt a budget each year, but if you do the heavy lifting in terms of the extensive review and analysis every other year, the intervening year could be marginal changes, responding to things that came up that were unexpected. But we've done it for a 2-year. We've taken a 2-year window rather than a 1-year loop, so we're not killing everybody off with the whole process.
How common is that?
Sorry?
How common is that? Have you seen?
There are cities in Utah that do it.
Hmm.
And again, you have to adopt a budget each year,
Yeah.
but that doesn't necessarily mean you need to start over
Right.
each year.
I have a question. Aren't we I see we have a 5-year budget cycle in our public works with the water situation.
And you have a 5-year CIP, and you have 10-year forecast, you have 5-year CIP, and also then that you have a 5-year proposal with regard to rate schedules, yes.
And so I just looked at what they were planning for 5 years. What's the difference to what? I mean, 2 years, 5 years, what is the difference? What is the difference between the 2-year program that they've got and the 5-year program that?
How much of a pay increase are you going to give in year 2?
For?
Everybody in the city.
Depends on what the economy does. That's a good point.
But that's the kind of thing that we're suggesting you sort of, you take a 2-year look and say, okay, we think we can do 2.1% this year, we think we can do another 2% next year. And you sort of say, that's what we're going to build our planning around. And because that's a big chunk of the city budget right there, if you can just sort of address that question. Obviously, you're going to have to make some adjustments in the second year because you're not exactly sure how much health insurance costs and retirement costs are going to change. So you'll have to make some adjustments, but you'll have that general window there. Something to think about at any rate. This proposal, we don't want you to underestimate the amount of work that this proposal represents, both for the council and for the administration. So we suggest that you learn from others that have gone through the process. We have a neighbor up the road that's done it, that's been done it for several years in Park City, smaller jurisdiction, different form of government. We think it'd still be useful for you to have a conversation with city council members from Park City and just talk about the transition that they went through and whether or not they like what they've got now and what they would do differently. We also suggest that you start this summer and fall on the goal selection and a review of the current spending. If you wait until January to do that, you're going to run out of time before you have to adopt another budget. We also note that it may be necessary to phase in the implementation. So maybe in the first cycle, we ask the departments to report on the desired outcomes, and we postpone the actual bidding till the second cycle. So we get them thinking about outcomes and monitoring that, developing the data for it, and we ask them to start bidding the second cycle. So there are ways that we can ease into this so that it doesn't become overwhelming, but the end result still moves us in the direction of looking at long-range outcomes, or long-range goals, establishing short-term priorities, building a budget that's intended to pursue and promote and accomplish those short-term objectives. So the departments and the administration are focused on achieving the council's objectives. Why bother doing this? Well, I'll just give you 2 examples. You've approved a property tax increase that is intended to pay for an additional police officer. The question is, which priority guided that decision? And how will you know whether or not that is accomplishing your objective? The second example is that you're in the middle of a discussion about how would you allocate a RAP tax if it's adopted by the citizens. Again, which priorities are guiding that discussion? And how will you know if the allocation you settle on is actually accomplishing your goals. Our contention is that if the budget process is tied to the goals and the priorities of the council, and you have those kinds of outcome objectives in mind, that your decision-making processes will be improved and will be much easier. With that, we'll try to answer your questions and hopefully see some discussion.
I just make a comment that Mr. Walters has presented is very much in line with the direction we've been moving with the policy governance model, defining your outcomes that you want to achieve and creating policies that articulate those outcomes. And this would be a next step to implementing that model, in my opinion. And certainly I think there are some caveats and things you got to think through, and that's my 2 cents on it.
There's a lot of things about this I really like. I can see there might be some challenges in our form of government. I was wondering if you know of an example of a city with our form of government that has used this process.
Yes, there are a number, including probably the poster child is Baltimore, which has much tougher politics than we do. And they're leading the way on this.
I don't think the form of government is necessarily the issue. I think having the administration highly involved in the process is probably the key factor here. Having their buy-in, belief, and support to that they're going to respond to the policies in a way that will help achieve them. It's certainly the council's role to set policy. And so I think just, again, you can set policy, but if it's not being heard or it's not bought into or believed in by the administration, then that's where we see maybe opportunity for conflict. But if you are yoked together in this effort, then much more likely to succeed in the long term.
And I would suggest that this, in many ways, helps the administration as they manage the departments. Because if you've got the budget that says, okay, the programs in this department are said they were going to accomplish these outcomes to further the council's objectives, then when you meet on a monthly or quarterly basis with the department heads, you can review the data and you can start saying, okay, how are we doing? Are we making progress? Are we doing what we said we were going to do in this budget? If not, why not? Do you need more? Do you need less? Do you need different? From a management perspective, I think this kind of an approach would help the administration in their management of the city.
Yeah, and this was I think a good in response to what the mayor has requested over the past 2 years since I've been involved, is direction from the council. What are the council goals? What is the direction that the council would like to go? And we started with not budget, but intent statements. We created intent statements at a retreat, and those have not, we haven't completed those. And I think staff also have at different times mentioned, what are the goals? What are the council goals? We're doing this, but we're not sure exactly where the council's at. And I myself in these budget meetings, budget members have asked Gary and I, what do you think? What are the council's goals? And I don't think we haven't articulated as a council exactly what our goals are. And so I see this as a framework for articulating what the goals of the council are as a body. These are our goals. And giving clear direction to the administration, to staff, and even to ourselves. Is this meeting our goals? Is the budget meeting our goals? And having a clear framework of where we're headed. I know that we have a couple of issues that we're very concerned about. We're concerned about the low-income housing tax credits, and we've had a couple of different things come up where that seemed to be a priority. We also have we have several things that have come up, but we don't know as a body. We've never really spoken to this is our priority. These things are our priority, and this is what we would like to see. These are the outcomes we would like to see with that, and then making sure that our budget reflects that somehow, so that we can see the outcomes we would like to see. And I think this is just a good framework. We don't have to, as you mentioned, we don't have to follow it exactly. I don't think anyone who uses budgeting for outcomes follows it exactly, but starting with the framework and having established goals as a council that are clear for everybody to see what the goals are and what the outcomes are that we would like to see, I think is really valuable.
I agree with Kim. We do need to clarify for the administration and for us as a council so we can be responsible to the people on what our goals are and what we want to do. One of the concerns that I do have is I have yet as a council member but actually been able to step up and say, I want you to take money from one place and put it in the other place, because I don't know that I'm hoping that those departments are actually running as efficiently as they can. And I don't know that it's actually my ability, if I have the ability to say, I'm going to take this money out of parks because I want a safer community. What am I doing to parks? I don't know that we've actually done that. We have set priorities maybe on safety or something like that, and we've given it to the administration that says, we'd like you to focus on safety. And yet we've never really taken money from somebody and said, give them that much more. And I don't know that I know how to do that exactly.
Well, one of our priorities is infrastructure and our upgrades and replacements. That's a priority. And so that actually, taking money might be giving money to each department to help, with their capital improvement needs.
Well,
and a percentage, or maybe a percentage of this is where we would like to see the money go in. And then it's the department's job to decide, or how they make that happen. We would like to see that this is a priority for us, keeping up with our infrastructure. And
I think we've done that as a council to a certain point. When we look at what we did with the roads, the utility transportation fund, we said that became a priority, and we worked on that together, and we worked with it. All right, we didn't take money from anybody. We actually had to create a new fund. And because I think I've heard people say, I'm worried about the Covey Center. I never go to the Covey Center. Why do I want to pay for the Covey Center? I get that all the time. Why am I doing that? Why am I subsidizing a golf course? Why am I doing this, that? So do we as a council actually say, okay, we're going to get rid of that money. We want you to take that much money from the golf course and throw it somewhere else. Is that our priority, or do we come back to the administration and say, our priority is this, we would like you to focus on this, and you tell us how you're going to do that? That's the question I've got. Do we tell them how to do it, or do we work together on doing this together? That's a concern that I've got. And I also I'm also concerned about just making sure that, I lost that spot. I'm going to have to come back. I can't remember what I was going to say. I had one more concern that I was thinking about.
Gary, if I told you, if you took $20,000 from the golf course, you could solve the safety problem on the Provo River Trail, would you be willing to do it?
Probably, but then I'd say, what are we going to do for the golf course?
Well, and maybe we just say you're going to have to increase the green fees, or we're going to have to cut someplace on the golf course, but we're not going to spend that much on golf because we're more concerned about safety. And I'm not saying that but that's the kind of trade-off that essentially the council is asked to make. That's why we give you those big bucks every year.
And I agree. And I think the administration has come to us several times and said, okay, if you want us to do this, where are we going to get the money? And I look at what they have done in the past. I look at where we've gone with benefits, for example, insurance for our employees. They've skyrocketed over the last 6 or 7 years. Have we ever has he ever told the administration, you've got to fund this by kicking out something else? All of a sudden, somehow, they have been able to get a balanced budget.
But how did they do it in the recession? They cut people.
And they cut people, but again, we didn't tell them necessarily to cut. They came back and said, this is a recommendation.
Because they had to present a balanced budget.
I understand that. And I appreciate that.
But where they cut was your decision. They made a proposal and you made the decision.
We made the decision. And I agree with that. And that's why I believe it's so critical that we're working together in this. So critical.
I agree.
And that yeah.
But you also need to have in your mind what it is you're trying to accomplish so that when you're faced with making those kinds of cuts, you can do so.
I agree.
In a way that is consistent with your priorities.
We did that. We 5% off the board, right off the top. We've cut those things, and we came back to him the next year and said do 3%, and dealt with that but we didn't really get down to the specifics of where we as a council didn't get down to the nitty gritty and say, one person less. They came to us and said, we have to do it this way.
It would be easier for you to get down to that nitty gritty if you had your priorities well established.
And I agree. And those are the things that we need to give to them. I understand that if we have that vision and our priorities set, it makes their job easier also. I understand that.
So my perspective as a relatively new council member, having only seen 2 budgets, is I feel like we're almost entirely out of the loop in terms of budget priorities. Because when we see the budget in May, most of the major decisions have been made. So if we could make this work in partnership with the administration and sort of be involved throughout the whole process in setting the priorities as a team, the council administration, I think it would be terrific. I'm really interested to hear what the mayor has to say about it, though.
And I think we have the mechanism in place to do that. I remember the mayor meeting with council members sometime with his list of priorities, the opportunity to engage in that discussion and share or discuss. I think we have that in place.
Well, yeah, but I think as a council, we haven't come together as a body. I mean, we can have individual conversations and the mayor can share his goals and we can share our own personal goals, but we can't share goals as a council because we haven't said what our goals are. And that's what I think is so critical and important, and especially in our form of government, that we do that we do give what our goals and our outcomes, what we would like to. Not that we have to get into the small details of it, but these are our goals as a body. These are the outcomes we want to see as a body, and it makes our job easier when things come before us. Is this one of our priorities this year? Great, then it's something that we do want to allocate money for. If this isn't a high priority and there are other things that are top priority, then it makes our job a lot easier when it comes to allocating funds, because we already know as a body where we're at, what things we've valued for this year, for these next 2 years, if we decide to do a 2-year budget. And I think it makes our job a lot easier too.
I think it makes it easier at that point, but I think we make it harder at the other point. At establishing and coming together as a council as our goals, depending on how detailed we try to get.
Yeah.
I think that would be a huge struggle.
Well,
And take a large amount of time. We get that, and then it's easy to go to the mayor now and say, here's our priorities and fill it in. But I don't think I think we're shifting our struggle a little bit. I'm not.
I agree. We are shifting a struggle, and
And I'm not.
Maybe a different direction.
I'm not. I don't know.
It's hard, Kay.
Well, I looked back when, just as a practice, I looked back at when we did that exercise where we did prioritize things. On the whiteboard, we all put a 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever next to what we prioritized. And I looked at those priorities, and I looked at Vision 2030, and I looked at some of our goals, and a few goals did surface to the top just from the exercises that we've done so far. One was safety. The other one was economic vibrance. Another one was
Housing.
yeah, the housing. The housing. There were a few that did kind of surface, that bubbled to the top when I looked at all the things we've already prioritized. But we haven't said that in a formal statement, that these are the things that we prioritize, that these are the things we want to spend staff hours on, that these are our high priority, that we want most of our staff hours directed toward, that we want to let the administration know these are things that are really important to us. The mayor says, well, how important is urban deer control to you on this whole continuum? How important? Well, I can tell him how important it is to me, but as a council, we told him how important that is. So I think it's really helpful on so many levels to be able to prioritize some of those things, to look at some of our council policies that we already have in place and find out what is pertinent, what is most important, and where do we really want most of our resources spent, time and money spent on. right now and then prioritize down. So when some of these bigger things are met, we start working on some of the lesser things. You know, I think that's a way to really move forward. And we don't really know as a body where we're at until we say it, right? Until we vote on it, until we, you know, and I've heard from the mayor several times, well, is this council? Is this a council decision? Is this, you know, whether it's coming from a committee or is it coming from the council? I think they would like to know that it's the body of the council that really prioritizes this, that really wants this. Then they know that they can spend their time and it's time well spent because this is a decision of the council.
This has been an amazing process for me over the last year. I think this year I've been able to get into the budget more than anything. And as I did that, we came through, I remember when we did that, 1, 2, and labeled those things. As I have gone through the process of this budget cycle, we did that numbering. When did we do that? Was it in January or so?
Yeah, in that range.
My
Started.
My priorities have changed since I've been through that budget cycle. Actually, from where it was on that bulletin board, I remember thinking subsidies was a huge thing I wanted to think about. Now I start thinking, I look at what we're doing with the subsidies, that priority may have gone down just a little bit in my mind as I've looked at some of the other things that we've done. And so I think yes, we do need to set those priorities, but I think we need to be flexible enough that as we learn and as we grow, that we're also able to readjust those priorities and not say, this is number one today, because the budget for me in May and June was number one. What did that mean? I was working hard on that, but maybe some of my priorities kind of shifted. Now, as I look at some of the things that I want to deal with now, I look at the west side. That has actually jumped up as far as the planning that we need to do. So I think it's critical that we work together as a council and say, where do we actually feel we need to be? What are our priorities this month? And review them regularly, because I change.
Well, and I think opportunities come up as well, where
Yeah,
property
definitely.
becomes available or something critical, piece of something happens where maybe it doesn't fit nicely into one of our categories, but doesn't mean that we can as a council say, you know what, this is priority because of time, because of resources, because of whatever. If it doesn't fit, you know, perfectly under those 4 goals, it's not that we couldn't just say, hey, this is an opportunity that we really need to move on. But I think some of those 4 goals, a lot of them could encompass some of those things as well, you know, that we might not be thinking about. It might not be on our priority list, but we'll say, hey, this actually fits under, you know, wanting to keep up our infrastructure or whatever our goals happen to be.
And I think we've addressed, for example, what that high priority of infrastructure, we've really addressed that quite strongly in the last little while.
And I
So
thought
maybe
that was an example.
Yeah,
I
so
don't know.
maybe that has gone down on my priority list because I see all that we've accomplished and what the direction that we're going in that. But I agree with that we need as a council to have that vision.
I'm waiting for the chair to tell me. Would you like me to comment?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Anytime.
So a couple of thoughts. Yes, I would love you to be more articulate with your goals, but let me state that in essence, your goals are set and they are stated until you change them. So for instance, the Vision 2030 document, the general plan, those are your stated goals, whether you like it or not, unless you change them. And that is our blueprint. The other thing is, I might just toss out to you that my observation is that that you don't have a good grasp on your statutory responsibilities of the budget and what that really is. And until you know and determine what that is, I don't think you can undertake something like this. On the one hand, it might be viewed as simple as making sure there's no graft or fraud in the budget. And if you had a continuum, on the other hand, it might be we're using the budget to run the city. And part of what concerns me to some degree about this is it's clearly using the budget to run the city. To the extent that council members are selecting which of my employees will do a certain task, that's running the city. You can imagine if Steve Gleason, if one of your priorities was to increase scheduled service at the airport, and you were asking bids from my department about who could best accomplish that, you're really gonna decide who's gonna best accomplish that goal. And can you imagine what it would do to me internally for you to make that decision? What if the police department decided the way they're going to get one more officer is they're going to clean Center Street and plant the flowers there so they can get the budget to do that? You could see how that could throw me in just an absolute turmoil with my employees. How do I budget from one year to the next when staff one year have this responsibility and the next year they have this responsibility? So I think the first thing I would say to you is until you define amongst yourselves what your actual responsibilities with the budget, sure, it's very tempting to do more beyond which is your statutory responsibility, but be careful that you're not actually using that to run the city. And I can't imagine the former mayor that's on the budget committee saying, yes, I would love my council to have done this.
So I thought we talked about not the fact that you mentioned staff up there. This is a mayor council form of government, this example. And so the mayor is part of that. So it's different. We're not talking about doing this word for word or exactly the way Park City does it. They have a totally different form of government. And so some of the things that were mentioned when it talks about directing staff, we're not directing staff. We'll direct council staff. We can give direction to the administration as far as what our outcomes, what we'd like our outcomes to be, what our goals are. But we're not talking about directing police, and we're not talking about directing the airport.
So if you say this is a priority and we want different departments to bid on this priority, and we're going to select one that we think gives us the best value, I don't know how that's not directing my staff.
They come and report to us regularly
But they don't.
Well, and if we're to adapt this model, they would make a bid and propose it to the mayor, and the mayor would bring it to you.
Which
under our form of government.
Which would be fine too.
That's what we had.
But I can't comprehend any scenario where that's what I would do. Where I would go to my departments and say, look, I want the trail to be safer. Which of you can do it best?
Well, I was saying you look at the goals and look at the outcomes that the council wants, and you go to your departments and say, how will your departments fulfill these goals? And then they bring you their bids, and then you bring a budget to the council that represents the goals and outcomes that we hoped for and how it meets those, just like you would.
I guess my point is that's what we do. Don't tell me how to do that. Don't tell me how to bid that out. Don't tell me which departments to pick. Your goals in the Vision 2030 and the general plan, absolutely, those have to be crystal clear for us. And then we'll go determine how best to do that. And let me come back to this concept of, I think the very first thing you need to do is get on the same page about what your responsibilities are with the budget. And define what that is, and then let's make sure we agree on that.
So what do you feel, where do you feel there's overreach? It seems with your comments that you're saying that that we're not following the statute as far as the
reason I say that is I don't think I've ever heard this group or the council ever clearly define. I hear things like, oh, the budget is our single biggest priority. Okay, is it? And what about it is your single highest priority? Is it to make sure that the money is being spent wisely? Is it to make sure the money's been spent in a way that moves us towards our goals? What is, and until you define that, I don't think you can embark on a process like this.
And I think that's what we were trying to do, Mayor, was we have our list of goals here, and our goals, are we spending our money in reaching the goals that we have outlined in 2030 and in the general plan.
So I would have to tell you, we're actually doing pretty darn good.
And
that we could
I
click
agree
off
with
a
that.
substantial number of accomplishments on those things. So another thing that happens in goal setting is I would have been a high priority of mine to rebuild this building here. And so you articulate that and you go through the process, and guess what? We got to the end and it just didn't work. So you got to be adaptive. You move to the next thing, and this one goes on hold for a while. And if you said to me it's a priority to rebuild this building, then I stop everything else I'm doing. I don't do anything until I rebuild this building, no matter what it costs. And you need that give and take in goals to say, I'm bouncing off this one. I would have built a beach at the lake 5 years ago if it was just about going and accomplishing our goals only. Here again, let me come back to, it'd be really interesting to have a conversation amongst the council and the administration about really what is your responsibility with the budget. Brian, it's to approve the budget.
Well, as you were talking, the thought that occurred to my mind is I've heard that phrase too about the budget is our single biggest priority. I think, and Larry, tell me if I'm probably putting words in your mouth, but so I'm listening to this presentation. I think that you are proposing kind of a thought I've already had about that statement, which is that the budget shouldn't be your single biggest priority. The budget is instead your single biggest tool to accomplish whatever your priority is, right? And so instead of saying that the budget is your biggest priority, unless you think, in my mind, the only reason to say the budget is your single biggest priority is if you think the budget is actually itself a problem, meaning that the budget is out of balance and money is being flushed down the toilet and money's being embezzled. Then maybe you could say, the fixing the budget is our biggest priority. But otherwise, I think what Larry is proposing, and I think the mayor is also telling you with his comment about the building, is that the first step is to establish what the priorities are and then review the budget to see if it is in line with those priorities.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd change slightly on that is if you say our budget is our biggest tool, I don't know if I agree with that. Land use has really nothing to do with the budget being a tool. If it's a tool that's used to micromanage, that's no different than a board of directors micromanaging a business through their ability to control the budget. And I think that's what I'm saying to you is define that. Really, what are you comfortable with in using it as a tool? And what should you use it for as a tool? You could clearly use it to totally micromanage every aspect of the city with your authority. Is that the right thing to do?
I've said that it's our greatest tool. I've said that the budget is as a council, is our greatest tool, because as our job is oversight over the budget, that is how we can see if the goals of the city are being accomplished by where the money is being allocated, and that is a big part of our job.
So let me come back to oversight. If that's what the council decides, is that what you do? Is that what this is?
What I see this is a way of involving us in some of these shorter term goals, the 1 or the 2 year goals, that is sort of where the rubber meets the road of how we're going to spend the budget. I mean, I see how we've got the Vision 2030 out there, and we've got the master plan out there, and previous councils have been involved in passing those, but we're not really very involved in translating that on what are our priorities over the next year or two, at least from my perspective.
Should you be?
Well, I would think that we should be, not micromanaging certainly, but.
So if you say, let's use Larry's example, we're going to take 20,000 and we're going to say, don't spend it on the golf course, spend it on the trail. How is that not micromanaging?
Well, 20,000 I think is micromanaging.
Let's say it's 200,000.
But
Well, but let's put it into different terms, which is that if the council passes a council and budget intent statement that says public safety is our #1 priority, and then they go down a step and say, due to the number of safety incidents that have occurred on the Parkway Trail, we think that improving safety on the Parkway Trail is the #1 goal that we have over the next 2 years in increasing public safety. Then that puts them in a position when the budget comes back, they can look at the budget and say, Mayor, how does the budget you've proposed accomplish increased safety on the Provo Parkway Trail? And I think they do have the ability, if you say it doesn't, to say, well, we're not going to approve the budget until it does.
And I think that's beautiful. And I think the question at hand then is, so they set these goals up here. And so the first one is we want to improve safety through the city. With city council wouldn't put that as a real high priority. And I think what I'm asking the council is how far down are they comfortable defining that outcome? And in some cases, it might go further down than others. If public safety is a problem, and if people are, if we have marked problems on the trail, they may choose to go down further. And then I agree, the administration needs to come when we show a budget and show how we intend to meet that goal. But I think what I'm pushing back on a little bit is that's probably not for the council to define how we meet that goal, but rather to judge if we are meeting it.
I have a suggestion for next step. I think it would really be helpful to me if the budget committee or maybe staff could help with this, could find an example of 1 or 2 cities, not Baltimore, that are closer, well-run, closer to our size, that have our form of government, and that are a little more toward this model of how they operate. I'd really like to see how it works in practice.
And I guess I would ask the question, do you have other ideas of how we can make goals? And we don't have to use this system. We can also, just as a council, decide that I feel it's an important practice, whatever we do, whatever method we use, it's important to identify what our goals are and the outcomes, because we are going to be asked time and time again, and every time staff presents something or every time the mayor brings something, is this a priority to you? And how do we know if it's a priority if we haven't established what our goals and priorities are? So whatever template we decide to use, I think it's important that we use it, that we do it at some point, whether it's this template or another template that you find that might be a better example. The important part is just to do it, to define what we feel are our most important goals and priorities and the outcomes that we want to see with that, and to be able to give that direction that they've asked for time and time again, and we as a body have not yet come to those conclusions yet.
I'm going to disagree with you on that one, Kim. I think that we have actually come to some conclusions. We have all these statements in place, and that's what the mayor began this discussion with, is in the absence of different direction, we're going with what we've got.
Well,
And so
they're going with the general plan and with Vision 2030, but there are 35 plus things in there. Are those all our priorities? How can we say those are all our goals right now that we want to do within the next year?
I agree with you that we have not prioritized properly, but we do have goals, and we've asked staff and we've asked department heads to, when they come in and say, these are the plans that we're doing, and this is how it relates to the general plan, and this is how it relates to 2030. These are some of the goals that and over the last year, I think we've done much better as we begin a presentation. This is why we're doing it. And I look at what community development does. This is it. Their last statements are always these are in compliance with these 10 goals that they've listed. So I don't want to, I think we're doing some of those things. I don't want to shortchange us with some of the work that we've done in the past.
No,
Haven't we had intent statements too?
Yeah, but they're not completed. The budget intent statements are completed, but the other intent statements, we haven't brought them back and actually voted on them as a
But it seems like
council.
that was a template, and we kind of did that, and we haven't completed it. And we did that priority exercise, and we kind of have that, but we haven't really completed it. So we kind of go back to the fallback is 2030 and.
So can I just interject? I don't think this is bad, and let me tell you why. It should be hard for you to change direction, and it should be hard to come up with goals that are different than the previous council came up with. The city needs that stability, if that makes sense. And so, but where there is fine tuning and where you do want to change or change the priorities around, it should take a long time, right, to shuffle priorities of a council. And what we're saying is, yes, we sense, and I think part of our problem is we sense sometimes from the council a priority shift, more zoning enforcement, right, and things that may come to us as a sense. I think that's, Kim, what you're sensing as well. Would you articulate that for us? Could you help us by coming together as a body and making sure this just isn't 2 council members or 3 council members that want to do this, but we would really like you to speak as a body, because we're going off this tried and true tested set of goals here, and we're moving the city forward with these. And if we're going in the wrong direction, we want you to speak and speak loudly. And so these efforts that you've made to come together, you think of how much time you spent on articulating your budget principles and things like that. That's probably good that it's taken a long time. I think what we're saying as administration is great. We've got a plan. We're moving forward on it. We happen to be doing a pretty good job on it. Let us know if you're changing that direction at all. And please don't over micromanage us as you do that.
Well, and I don't agree with the micromanaging part of that, because it was never part of the intention. The intention was to set goals. I think it's, and I don't know, maybe it's the nurse in me, but you set, anytime you do a care plan, you set a measurable goal and you have objectives for meeting that goal, so that your patient improves and
Jim,
goes.
it depends if you.
And so if we're looking at city goals, if we want to see something happen, then if we don't set measurable goals, how do we know that the goals that we have, or what are our goals? We have 70 goals, but we can't do 70. I don't know, I'm saying 70, but there are a lot of goals. And how do we know that? How do we decide which goals are important to us? Which goals do we want to actually be accomplished this year? Or do we just let it be up to the administration to decide what they feel are important? And we can say yay or nay when it comes to the budget. I feel like it's our job to decide what things are important in moving our city forward and putting those goals forward and the outcomes that we want to see, and at least and articulating those as a body. Even though, yeah, does it take time? Does it take work? Is it going to be a little bit, it's going to be a little bit hard at first? Yeah, of course. Anything that's worth its weight, is going to be difficult. But I think the outcome is you have staff who know how to spend their time. They know where to spend their time. They don't have to ask. They don't have to come back for a vote from the body to decide, is this important enough for us to spend time? You have an administration that knows where they should spend time. I think everybody has, a better understanding of what's important to the council, and I think that's a real positive. That's not micromanaging. That is just setting measurable goals and then looking at the end of the year to see if we're meeting those. Are we meeting those? Are we moving things forward in a positive way? I think it's healthy.
So that depends on the depth that you're going with your measurable goals.
And
if your goal is to have a healthy patient, that's a fabulous goal. If your goal is to tell the administration what room they should be in or what doctor's going to treat them, then I'm telling you, you're getting down too far.
And I'm sorry that was the impression that you got, because that was not the impression of the committee. That was not what we wanted to convey when we spoke about this as a committee. And certainly as a council, I can't speak for the council, but it's not my intention to get down into the weeds. My desire is just what I said, just to have the goals that we want to have happen, the outcomes, which I think is very healthy. And however you want to accomplish that and bring that back to the council for in the next budget cycle is great. And then we can look at that, but then at least you have direction. You know what the goals are, you know what the desires are. If we don't articulate those, then you're guessing. And I think you've said that several times, that since there isn't a clear statement, you're kind
So,
of,
so let me use the zoning as the example. We have clear goals. I think we have clearer goals than any city I know of. And I think Vision 2030 was a big part of that. And that's why that's such an important document. When there's a sense from the council that they don't like how we're prioritizing things, that's when I'm saying to you, please articulate that. And I'll go to the enforced zoning that some of you have articulated. Is that a priority of this council? To this day, I still don't know.
Mhm. And I think that would be helpful too, because when you have enforced, there have been a couple of times where you have gone through the whole enforcement process and the neighborhood has brought back to the council and said, hey, we really want you to just change the law. We want to be able to do what we're doing. And if that's a goal of the council to enforce and to follow through with that, then we probably don't change the law. But if it's not important to us, I don't know. I think that it's helpful for us to know too, is zoning enforcement really important to us? And then it helps guide our decisions when some of those things come back to us.
Could I interject another example where I think?
Actually, Larry, we're really running behind. We have another presentation waiting here. So why don't we work with our executive director and staff to surface our intent statements from our previous retreat and see how close we're coming to some of the things that we've talked about today. And I think this has been a healthy discussion and certainly a great presentation, Larry, to see this example from Park City, what they're doing and how we can get more focused on priorities and see how closely they're aligned with our administration. So if that's agreeable to everyone, then we'll move in that direction. So thank you. Thank you again, Larry. And thanks, council, for your input on that.
Okay, so can you say that one more time? We're going to have staff.
You mentioned that we hadn't completed the work on our
statements.
intent statements, and you're right, we do need to do that. And maybe we, as some leadership, can work with them to pull together what we have so they can be presented either in a retreat shortly or in our next work session.
Okay. And you didn't say anything about Park City?
No, I said thanks for this.
Oh, that's okay,
example.
sorry.
Yeah.
I was still back on the previous conversation in my brain. So.
Okay. Again, thank you, Larry, for being here today and your time. We have Quinn Monson and Kyrene Gibb back with us today. Appreciate your being here again. And they have come to present, to provide a report on the results of the RAP tax survey that we all reviewed and that's been performed since over the last week, about 5 to 7 days. And so we'll allow them to present their findings at this time.
What is my pleasure? I can use the GA too. That's it right there. Separation. Use that VGA then? I can use VGA. What do you have? Is that what this is down here? Yep. You have to go back to the same thing.
Show me that.
Hit input. Keep on going. PC. Yes.
might still be.
Want to do it over there to here? I'm a little.
PC has direct input.
Every time I've been here before, we've been on the projector and the screen.
This is brand new for us.
Well, all right.
Kinda-
I don't feel that bad.
Oh, this is brand new.
Hey, all right. That feels like a victory. Thank you. All right. Okay, well, so you have, or they have some hard copies. Oh, good. Of the survey top line printed out. These are hot off the press. This survey was in the field through last night at midnight. So while we were looking at results as they came in, these are probably still warm from being printed. They were entered a couple of hours ago, and I made some slides, started at midnight last night. So to show you what we've got. So I'm sure there will be more questions after the limited time that we spent on this today. And I'm happy to follow up with additional analysis of any kind that you would like. But let me just show you what we've got here. So let me just start off with, I've identified 6 things that I think speak to the broad purposes that you had for doing the survey and sort of highlight some of the major things. First of all, not especially related to the recreation, arts, and parks, but we did include a couple of questions early on to warm up about satisfaction with Provo, if the city's going in the right direction, the quality of life. And you'll see that the vast majority of Provo residency is moving in the right direction, and that's very consistent with past surveys going back several years. We'll see in just a moment a large majority of Provo voters would likely vote for the proposed RAP tax. That's also unchanged from previous surveys. It's about at the same levels as it has been in other surveys, even though we have changed the question up a little bit this time, and I'll show you some of those variations in a moment.
Brent, can I ask you, you said from other surveys, when was the last time you did a RAP tax question?
We asked one in the spring of this year. We asked one a year ago in the spring as well. Just a hypothetical, not quite as detailed as this one. So we made this one appear more like an actual vote question than we have in the past. In the past, it was just expressions of support for the idea.
Thank you.
And this is a little more specific to a vote. We tested some ideas about what might increase or decrease support for a proposed RAP tax, and I'll show you that it's mostly related to parks and river trail upgrades that gets people excited about this. That what they really want are upgrades to parks and trail. And that the most popular parks and rec projects focus on replacing and upgrading existing facilities, especially playgrounds, the river trail, and park restrooms. Those rank higher than other things. So just to give you a sense of what people respond to. Now, when you see this, you'll see that we made a list, and we may have left something important off the list. So this is limited in part by our own creativity in terms of what we could think of, what we already had on hand to put on the list. But it is consistent with the overall response, positive response to parks on the survey. There are some arts projects that we included, and the most popular ones there have to do with the potential support for museums, music festivals, and programs at the library. And then finally, whether you talk about it in terms of the current budget or proposed RAP funding that might come in the future, voters would like to see arts spending proportionally increase. Now, I say proportionally because it's higher than the current levels of spending. It's not
a huge dramatic change from where you're currently at in terms of your budget on parks and recreation and arts, but it does show arts increasing. And there's some interesting twists there that I'll get to in a minute. All right, in terms of the methodology, the sampling frame here is the universe is every registered voter in Provo. We took a random sample of these records and appended email addresses from a commercial database. In total, we sent out 15,450 email invitations. We got back just over 1,100 responses for a 7% response rate. That doesn't sound great, but in terms of survey research these days, that's actually not too shabby, especially for a pretty short fielding period. We weren't in the field not even a week quite, yeah. So that's actually pretty good. Telephone surveys these days can do a little bit better than that, but it takes a long field period and lots of phone calls, lots of attempts. So this is actually pretty good. This gives us a margin of error of about 3 percentage points. And we did weight this to be representative of voters in terms of gender and age distributions that we know from the voter file and just from other surveys. Okay, so just quickly, just to give you to warm you up as well, in terms of asking whether Provo is headed in the right direction or the wrong direction, 91% said the right direction. Again, very consistent with past surveys, and very consistent with the overall rating of the quality of life on a 0 to 100 scale. My memory is that it's 82. Which is again consistent with recent surveys that we've done in Provo. So that's very good.
Can we gloat?
Yeah, let's pause for a minute and let that sink in. Yeah, Provo, and a lot of this is, Provo residents live here for a reason. They like it here. There's a bit of a selection bias. People stay that like it, but for the most part, they really like. Really think it's going in the right direction. All right. Now here is the question, the vote question that we came up with. And you'll see that there are 2 different versions. So I've got some brackets here to show you where we plugged in some extra language and we gave a random half of the respondents the short version and then another random half the longer version. And all it does is just give a little more explanation. We were wondering if we say a little bit extra about this, does it help or does it actually raise concerns? And we wondered what would happen. And the drum roll is, so here's the question. Provo officials are considering a recreation, arts, and parks or RAP question for the ballot this November. Below is the language as it might appear on the ballot. Please read it carefully and then indicate if you would vote for or against this in November. So the short language that comes from the statute that we worked with the city attorney on is, shall Provo, Utah be authorized to impose a 0.1% sales and use tax to fund city recreational parks, trails, and arts facilities. And then we tagged in on the longer version, potentially including capital upgrade and replacement of city facilities and ongoing operating expenses of private, nonprofit, arts, and cultural organizations. I wondered if the inclusion of the operating expenses language might drive support down. Okay, we're up. I mean, I wasn't sure, to be honest. Well, look, didn't make a difference. Didn't really no difference whatsoever. I mean, you can see that it's slightly different, but that's nothing to write home about. So for the purposes of any further analysis, I think we'll just combine them into a single question that shows about 71%, which is almost identical to a very different question we had in the spring and a very different question we had the year before, but it always seems to get up into the low 70s in terms of support. Okay. In terms of some of the things, we tested some ideas that might help people to be more or less likely to vote for, or more likely to vote for, more likely to vote against this. And I've placed them here in order of what would make people more likely to vote for it. So the top one, the top argument that we presented them that had
more than 70% saying they were more likely to vote for it as a result is the argument that says shoppers and other visitors from outside of Provo would help financially support parks, recreation, and arts and trails through sales tax dollars they generate. Almost identical numbers for the Provo River Parkway Trail could be repaired and improved, and almost nearly identical numbers here for improvements or completion of existing city parks would happen more quickly. So the park improvements, Provo River improvements, and this idea of generating revenue from non-residents were easily the three messages that generated the most additional support for this proposed RAP tax.
Can I interject briefly
Yeah.
here? So, and you see these three messages appearing in the open-ended comments at the end of the survey quite often as well. You see a lot of people talking about how you have to go outside of Provo to shop at a lot of the places they want to shop, or to do the activities that they want to do. You know, arts and cultural things exist more out, there are more opportunities that they perceive outside of Provo. So that's one thing. They want to bring people here to spend their money here and support arts and cultural activities within the city. And then the Provo River Trail is definitely an object of concern that's on a lot of people's minds.
It came up on a number of different, we had it on a number of different points in the survey, and it was at or near the top of a lot of priorities and lists you'll see here. Cultural programs and events at the library, also a positive one, a net positive. In fact, they're all net positive. If you move to the next page here, even the ones that don't do as well, the one that's the lowest is increasing the quality and number of programs at the Covey Center for the Arts. That's the only one that had less than the majority saying it would be more likely to vote for it. But even there, only 22% said that was something that made them less likely to vote for it. So in no case do you see any of these arguments making a large proportion of people less likely to support a RAP tax. It's on this first page where you see some heavy support for the river trail and park improvements. Okay, so that gives you an idea of the kinds of things that people respond to. We could have tested another 8 of these, I'm sure, but these were the ones we chose to try out. Now, another section of the survey included, we have a whole bunch of questions I don't have on the slides. Again, these slides were generated starting at about 12:30 last night. But there's a whole set of questions about what people do and use that I haven't included in the slides. But we did have them rank arts and parks, specific arts and parks projects. And what I've got here is the average ranking for the 7 projects that relate to the arts. And you see that there's a tie for 3 of them: support for Provo Museum, support for local music festivals or shows, and fund arts or cultural programs through the Provo City Library, all tied for the lowest rank, meaning the one that people prefer the most. Okay. A distant
Hey Quinn,
fourth,
can you tell us how these are, just for everybody's sake, how they rank these? So these were, they put this in a priority order.
right.
Correct?
So we had all of them listed on the screen, and they were able to drag and drop them into the order that they wanted to prioritize them. Yeah, okay, thanks, Corey. So a close, following closely is support for local theater and the Covey Center. Those aren't too far apart, but then the rooftop concert series and support for local dance companies, which pains me as the spouse of a modern dancer, came in at the end here.
This is really interesting, I mean, because the rooftop is where we get most of our people. We don't even, where are the museums? How many people attend a museum and compared to the rooftop concert series?
I think it's a hypothetical in the sense that they'd like to do more of that. So we didn't specify existing or future. I think it's the thought of being able to do that.
Also consider the demographic.
Exactly.
This is registered voters.
Half of which were empty nesters.
So as you get into the demographic, you'll see that Many that took the survey may not have gone to that.
So one of the things I will point out, just for example, that's not on the slides, but let's see, is the ratings of, if you look on page 9, we have them rate the following activities and services in Provo. So we start Q Service 1, it's the Provo Rec Center. You see that the Provo Rec Center has amazingly high ratings. 72% give it above a 4, with 42% rating it a 7 on the 7-point scale. It's very good. Now, it's not that surprising. It's brand new, state of the art, it's beautiful. If you look down at the rooftop concert series, you have, and you see in the question wording, we say, if you have no experience with the service, just say don't know. 76% say don't know on the rooftop series. Now, for the people that actually rate it, if you re-percentage it, for the people that actually go, they love it, right? For the quarter of Provo that has gone before, they think it's spectacular, it's wonderful, but it appeals to a certain demographic that's younger and doesn't vote. It's not included in this sample.
I see that on the golf course as you get there.
Yeah, the golf course is even worse in the sense that it's not everyone in Provo that's using it, right? It's a very limited set of people that use it. That's right. Okay, so again, this ranking should be taken with a grain of salt in the sense of we came up with these. What we tried to do was write a list that sort of spanned different kinds of arts and culture, so that we had theater and music and dance and museums and sort of all of those listed, and we allow people to rank them. And then we included the library just because it's where some of this currently happens. And it turns out, if you look back at what is used in Provo, the library gets a lot of usage. And so you can see people ranking something highly at a location in Provo that they actually frequent a lot. Okay, I'll give you a sense for this. In terms of the parks, we have a high or low ranking, I guess, a positive response to restroom replacement and renovation, replace aging playground equipment. This is on page 12, and the Provo River Parkway trail improvements and resurfacing. So those three are the three that tie for the top ranking in terms of parks and arts. Okay, the other thing that was a major purpose of the survey was this question. So if you flip over to page 18, we went the rounds with the city staff to get a good question here, a good set of questions. And what we decided to do was present some information. Okay, so you see the question is worded, in the current budget, without the proposed RAP tax, the Parks and Recreation Department allocates funding for parks, recreation, and arts programming as follows. And we actually gave this information on the screen in terms of the percentages and millions of dollars. And then we asked them, thinking about the current budget, how do you think the Parks and Recreation Department should allocate funding for parks, recreation, and arts programming? And there was a little tool where they could drag across and make the three categories add up to 100%, basically. So this is where an internet survey is extremely useful, because I don't think at least some of them would have gotten the math right without the computer sort of saying, no, it doesn't add up, keep working on it until they get to 100, right? And so what we find is that when they're asked to allocate it, the average is 41% for parks, 39 for recreation, and 20 for arts. Now, I've displayed that with the full distribution here, so you can sort of see how spread out it is for each of these. So, you know, there's kind of a consensus around that 40 and that 39. What's interesting to me is the arts one. Because while it's at 20, there is a group that's not like you see on recreation and parks that doesn't want to do anything at all. Okay? They're not an enormous group, but they're not
it's about 10% that say no. And again, this is another thing you see in the comments. There are a number of open-ended comments that where people are just philosophically opposed to this. And that's dragging that down a little bit. Anytime you compute an average where there's a bunch of zeros, it does drag it down. Okay. Here's where the current numbers are, right, that we gave them. So you can see that the parks percentage comes out on average. What they want is about what we have. Similarly for recreation, where it's higher is for arts, tempered by the fact that there's this group that doesn't want to do anything. So this is where I would say that this, I think they respond well to parks projects in terms of the proposed RAP tax. That's where they respond the most strongly. When you narrow it down and say, just focus on the arts, they have some priorities, and then they say, we want proportionally a little more arts funding in the current budget. And then if you ask the same question, now it's the follow-up question was, if the RAP tax passes, how do you want it allocated? And it's basically, they give the same answers again. The distributions look and the averages are almost exactly the same. So actually giving them that information about the current budget, I think framed it where they chose numbers that were largely consistent with what you're doing on parks and recreation, and then it added up to quite a bit more on arts. But that spread is a lot different in terms of what it looks like with all these folks down here at zero. Yeah.
Gwen, as you got the numbers, it's pretty easy to determine where we'd spend money on, whether it's a park or the recreation programs. In the arts, in our city, we're a little different.
Yeah.
Because we spend some of the things in the library might be considered arts.
Mm-hmm.
How did you come up with the
list?
With the list and saying this is where we are?
In terms of
what we're spending,
these?
yeah, what we're spending now.
These are numbers I got from your staff, so I don't know.
It's from the Parks and Recreation budget. It doesn't include any library activities.
Because we have activities in the library that might be considered art. I don't know. That's the I was just concerned about.
So it also wouldn't include rooftop.
So maybe the actual spending is a little closer in terms of percentage if you gathered all of the art spending from other categories.
Anything that had its own budget in the budget book that was that we could say this is arts, we put it in there. But rooftop doesn't have its own.
So you can see on page 18 the dollar figures and the percentages that they were given, and
yeah,
your staff can answer the question about where that came from a lot better than I can. Okay, so again, people respond favorably. If you were to propose this and you want it to pass, talking about it in terms of parks, upgrades, river trail is the way to people's hearts on this. But there is a group. There is at the same time there is a sentiment that there should be some arts funding. Okay, it's not equal to recreation or parks, but it should be included. And you need to be aware that there is this vocal sort of opposition to any arts funding at all. Okay, they're not a huge group, but they not only put zero here, but they go on to gripe about it a bit in the open-ended comments at the end of the survey and in other places. So if those are all presented in here, I would encourage you to read those. Just sort of get a feel for. Don't read them. Don't read them before you go to bed or when you're trying to get to sleep. How's that?
And then part of the 9%. The 9%.
Yeah,
we're not.
Perhaps, yeah. Okay, so again, Provo's seen as going in the right direction. You got a large majority, about 71% that would likely favor a RAP tax if it were on the ballot. It increases because of projects related to parks and trails especially. And that argument about getting outsiders to pay for some of this resonates as well. The most popular parks and rec projects focus on playground upgrades and replacement, river trail improvements, and park restrooms. And again, that draws back to
stuff that's not on the slides, as you look at where people spend their time, lots of people spend time at the library and in city parks. They are there all the time. The vast majority of Provo residents go there at least a few times a year or more often, and many go even more often than that. The only place that's higher than that is the rec center, where you have a pretty heavy usage across the city, which is, but that doesn't need upgrades right now, I don't think. So, and then the most popular arts projects are support for museums, music festivals, and programs at the library. So just in the hypothetical, these aren't things that actually necessarily exist, but just to sort of get a sense of priorities in terms of categories, this is what people chose. And then finally, whether it's the current budget or proposed RAP funding, voters want to see arts spending proportionally increase. And that's it. Any questions I can address? I don't know that I had a lot more time than that, but
Just want to say thank you. That was very helpful.
good.
Thanks.
We can do further analysis or ask or answer any questions that people have in the coming days if that's important. So.
Can we have that, the slides?
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
Those will be sent along.
Thank you, Joe.
Yes, thank you, Quinn and Irene. Thank you for your work and late hours last night to put this together for us. So very interesting and helpful. Next on our agenda, we have an item that has come from our Council Governance Process and Rules Committee related to our closed meeting agenda prioritization. And this is discussion that Dave Sewell and I have had and would like to share it with the council at this time, related to when we have closed meetings, which I don't believe we have today, but the prioritization of agenda items. Dave, would you like to present that?
Sure. Matt, do we have a copy of the
Yes,
proposed?
it was distributed. It was already
It's
distributed.
sort of been distributed, but if you don't have a copy.
All right. Has it, oh, it's right next to me. No?
Yeah.
Yeah, the one in the, oh, right there. Yeah, I do have it. Sorry. I just didn't recognize it. Okay, so just a quick background on this. This is not something that would come up very often. In our last meeting, we had a closed session on a council issue. It was a, what do you call it, character and competency discussion. And I think it's the only closed session I remember where the administration representatives left the room and it was just the council talking about something. At least maybe I've forgotten something, but what happened was we had an important decision to make that night and discussion related to that. And there were some administrative items that I don't think were particularly time sensitive that ended up taking all of the time that we had, and it was about 5 minutes after the public meeting had started. People were waiting for us to go in when we even got started on the discussion. So our thinking was that the default should be on those very rare occasions when the council actually does have something that we need to cover that's like that should go first, and just to make sure that there's adequate time for discussion. So that was kind of the thinking behind this proposal.
We recognized that the staff often put the agenda together, and that leadership can certainly influence the order of items. But this is viewed as a policy that could be used by future councils and could memorialize really the thoughts and feelings that we have today related on this experience. So that as a general rule, the council business in a closed session would appear first on the agenda.
this may not come up again for 2 or 3 or 4 years, and the thought was to get something down on paper to kind of guide future chairs and maybe future executive directors.
To me, it's a matter of prioritizing our meetings almost. If we recognize that we've got an issue that we need to have up front, we need to give it more time. We just need, maybe we as a council need to be a little bit more efficient in our discussions and say, we're going to end at this time, we're going to start at this time, and maybe that's the challenge. And I can understand the idea of putting council, maybe, I don't know, that it just depends on the priority of the discussion in my mind. Which one needs the decision right then? It may not be council. Maybe we have something, maybe the
a deadline that has to be.
or maybe the administration has a deadline. To me, deadlines are more important than necessarily the topics.
The way this is drafted, though, it allows the council to, a majority, to override the policy, which is true with any council rule. So if you're in a situation and the administration makes a plea to you, say, no, we really need to have your attention first on this agenda, this is a big priority, you can certainly reorder the item of the agenda.
I don't know that I've been in one of these that hasn't felt rushed, because we squeeze it in between a very full work meeting and then a really hard deadline. I've wondered if we should make it the default that if you don't finish the business that we reconvene after council meeting. And because if it's an executive session by nature, it's probably pretty important. And I'm wondering if that's the way to solve it, and certainly start with the council ones, but maybe that's the default. Is if it is time sensitive, it just rolls over. We get to that meeting at 5:30 and you roll it over to, none of us want to stay any longer, but we're all there, and it's better than reconvening or waiting 2 weeks for an issue.
That's an interesting approach. We would have to be ready, like in this case, we would have had to been prepared to continue the item that was related to it in the public meeting. I mean, as long as we're...
Because that's where I think from a priority standpoint, you'd say, look, this has to happen at the 5:30 meeting, whatever administration's got, we'll come back to and deal with after this.
Because it doesn't have any bearing on the council.
Right.
Yeah.
So in the same situation, will there be instances when the administration might have something that bears in the council? Maybe not.
And I think if you do, then as Matt says, we say, hey, can we get a special pass on this one? We've got a vote coming up on this. You need to know some information. Murphy's Law is these things all line up for one, we'll go months without an executive session, and then they all line up, and they're all important.
One observation is if we have adequate sense of how much time we need, we can schedule more time. Special meetings can be called. We have historically did not have a closed session on the agenda as a regular standing item. That was always challenging from the standpoint of calling together impromptu meetings, scheduling, and finding out who was available, calling in at odd hours. So it's been very, very convenient to just schedule an hour after work session on general to bring things in. But like the mayor said, some things you just can't do in an hour. If we have a better sense of how much time things are going to take, then we can do a better job of scheduling additional time or saying specifically, no, this is going to be held after the council meeting.
I kind of look to leadership to help us prioritize, because we may not even know what you guys are doing the budget. We may not even know how important these things are. So hopefully you will work with the administration and say, we have to have this right here and then. I'd look towards leadership for setting those priorities, because they're setting the priorities of the agenda anyway.
On a bi-monthly basis in the leadership sessions.
And a lot of what we bring you for executive session is frequently last minute.
True.
Something's breaking or something's moving, and we want you to be aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
I can support this. This is easy to support. If we ever find a time when we feel like, wow, we can't wait, then we'll certainly ask you. And I think we may ask you sometimes to come back after council meeting if it just is that critical.
Would you like there to be some mention of that in this policy, that would sort of be the default if?
It may not be bad to mention that because people's paradigm is sometimes we're all trying to get out of there as fast as we can, right?
So this would set the priority, and then if we're not through, the default would be that we would conclude after the
If
regular
it's
meeting.
time sensitive.
If it's time sensitive, unless we vote that it's not. So,
I mean, there was some debate early on, is it even necessary to articulate it in writing? And again, I think that the idea of paradigm is important because you may not have thought of that as even an option. If it's articulated on paper as an option, then it's more readily available in your mind as something that you can use and do, where it may not be on the radar otherwise.
A lot of times these executive session things are weighty. They're things that need more time and more questions from you. And we frequently do rush them to get through all of them.
so how about, just a suggestion, Mr. Chair, how about if we come back and try to incorporate that concept and then come back in the next session? Proposal.
That'd be great. Okay. Next is a discussion led by Matt Taylor on the potential amendments to the development agreement for the Arbors on the Avenue project on Duerden University, which is on our work session agenda and on our council agenda for tonight.
Pull up the proposal. Change the input to the, let me orient you to the property.
By the way, this new cool screen is neat. I like it.
A lot more clarity, and you don't have to turn off the lights to see the presentation anymore.
The HDMI 1, man. Oh, okay.
Not gonna be able to use that. Ryan, can you pull up Google Maps on PC? This item, we received a request from a development group last week. This is from JZW Architects representing a developer. I believe they may be in attendance. What was your name?
Harrison Horn,
Harrison. Thank you.
Somerset Court.
They've acquired the Arbors on the Avenue project. If you're familiar with that project, it's about 5200 North University. It's across from the Riverwoods. on the east side of the street. Phase 1 and 2 was completed, I'm guessing 2008, 2009, and in part of the original way that was approved was through a rezone mechanism. It was a pro zone. It had a specific unique zoning policy adopted to facilitate the project. The standards in the zoning are set. However, the project provided more parking and less units than permitted by the code. And the developer has come back. Well, so subsequently though, even though the zoning had different standards, the developer at the time entered in a development agreement with the council, setting specific standards tailored to the project. Trying to resurrect phase 3 now, a new developer has come into play, and it's been 5-6 years since the last developer lost the project, and I believe due to recession. And they have requested some changes.
Sorry, trying.
Says there's no connection. Is it still on? Right. Have to deal with that later. With that, there's some specific requests that they have in amending the development agreement, that they would only amend it in a way that's consistent with the allowed zoning. And that currently the project requires that each dwelling in the zone shall be 1,160 square feet. They're requesting a change. They're requesting a change that bring the minimum dwelling area to 1,000 square feet per unit. They're also looking at reducing the projections into yards. That doesn't seem right. Parking area shall include stalls and access roads. They're looking for it to be changed to be in line with the code again. Parking areas may also include carports and canopies. And I also believe they have a request to develop the overall density. So the development of the project shall consist of the current agreement is 112 dwelling units. They're looking for, again, 118. And that they increase the allowable number of units by 6, but that would still be allowed under the gross zoning of 24 units per acre. The parking, they're requesting to go from what was allowed under the development agreement, 2.6 parking spaces per dwelling unit, to reduce to the zoning minimum of 2.1 parking spaces per unit. This is the property that's under question.
So there's currently not canopy parking there, is there, for first two phases?
Phase 1 and 2, the parking is underground for the most part.
Okay.
They do have parking out front, facing the street, so there's a driveway and some parking. So at this point, I think the developer is here. He's available to, or the owner, and he's available to answer questions. If you're amenable to amending the agreement, it could be scheduled for 2 weeks out at your next council. Any questions for me?
Maybe if you'd like, I'd be happy to comment on some of the things that you just mentioned.
No.
Mr. Garrett?
I'm sorry.
The applicant.
That'd be great. Do people have questions?
He asked if you could comment on a few things.
Yeah,
That'd be
what I was
great.
going to just, let me just explain a couple of things. Property actually has been under contract 4 separate times by 4 different developers. Every time it has failed and they've walked away from it. Ivory had it under contract and no one could make it work. We took a look at it and we're ready to pass on it. Couldn't make it work either. But we came in and met with Bill Pepperone. We've been negotiating with him, talking with him now for practically 5 months, I believe. And so he encouraged us that the things we were asking for, he did not have a problem with them. In our plan, we are reducing the overall approved plan by 30,000 square feet. That's roughly a little bit more than a 20% reduction of what was already approved on it. So the square footage has gone down a bit on that. I guess they have, he mentioned that we had increased our setbacks, and that doesn't sound normal, but we have actually. So we've pushed the buildings back away from University Avenue by about 50% more than what was approved. And also, we have pulled them back away from the back hill side, which was a very sensitive hillside. And the reason we did that was because we were concerned about undercutting the canal, which is up on top of that, and was a little bit shaky. And so we've had engineers out, we've repinned the hill, we've mitigated the possibility of that canal failing, which was very great at the time. And so in the process, we've moved the buildings away from the back hillside. And so in doing that is where we lost the 30,000 square feet. So we actually have, I believe, 6 more units than what we originally put forth. They're somewhat smaller units. And so we don't expect the density to be more, but actually less density than what we had before. As far as the parking request, we had discussed that with him. I'm not a Provo developer. I don't do much here. Mostly I am a Park City developer. And so up there, I was kind of joking around with Bill on it and said, my last project up there, we have a hotel and about 40 high-end townhomes. And we had to fight with the city up there to try to get past 0.8 parking spaces for a 3-bedroom unit. And so I came down here and said 2.6. Whoa, this is like heaven. We really, but we also know what is necessary, and anything from 1.8 to 2 parking spaces more than adequate to do what we need to have done. We've done some traffic studies on the parking that's currently there. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, about 40% of the parking spaces in the underground parking structure were still vacant. And about a third of the above ground parking spaces were also vacant at that time. So I don't think the staff has any kind of a problem with the new high density standard, which the city has been told is adopted of 2.1. So we're just simply requesting the same as high density would be in Provo City at the present time. Some of the things that he was concerned mostly about that we've been able to accommodate them on is the look. They wanted to have these look and match with what was already there. So we hired the same architects that had done the first couple phases, and they have blended it to the staff's approval, I believe. The same colors, same architectural design and roof lines, etc.
We can have one other observation on this one. Part of the development agreement typically also approved the preliminary plan and elevations of the project as part of the agreement, requiring that the final plan coincides with the preliminary plan. So if there is a proposal to change the site plan or architecture elevations of these, that would also need to be included in the request to the council, is to amend the adopted exhibits referencing what can be built in this location. So we'll probably need those before the next meeting.
I don't know if the staff have thought that we've changed it enough with the architecture to require that, but if they do,
I think that would be up to the council to determine that.
So phase 3 is 2 buildings?
Phase 3 is 1.
Phase 3 is 1 building.
Has a breezeway between.
Okay. Each of those buildings is a phase of the current.
So there's currently 2 buildings built, and they were built in 2 phases, so this is Bo's 3rd phase, and we'll be building it all the full 3rd phase.
Okay.
Complete project.
Getting on and off University. Or is that going to come in through the existing and then down, or have you got access to University? You not giving you access to that?
We have a right in and a right out already on that side.
Which
it accesses, also goes through and accesses up to the stoplight that's there. So we have a basically through It goes all the way through the project.
Right in, right out, right there, down at the bottom.
Right.
Same thing on the other
And
end.
then there's a stoplight actually there, so.
Right.
Am I reading that right? Those are both 5200 north, all west. They're labeled on Google 5200 north, west.
Right.
So the south end is a right in, right out, and then the north end is in, and then you'll have roads.
I believe we can go,
All of
I
it.
believe we have a left end too. I think we can use
There's a
that.
light right there, so we have a right and left on the north.
On the north.
And on the south. We can
And
use-
now there isn't a
there's
light,
not
there's
there,
not a
but
light
we
on the
can
south.
access it from north or southbound traffic.
Because I know that into the Riverwoods there, that's only, you can't turn left into the Riverwoods.
No, it's a one-way access.
Yeah.
It's just right in. We
Are
can
these-
have both.
Condos or, so you'll look for a homeowners association to sell them, but. Let's see, there's another one is.
There's probably already one there.
Yeah,
There is a.
We're part of the same one. We've actually paid our share of all of the facilities for the pools and everything that's around. It's going to be out there. It's one project.
Just out of curiosity, price points? You got those?
Three.
Around 300. And what are the ones, the north started off outrageous.
550.
And that's one reason they went under. And so, what are they going at now? Are they, at that ballpark?
330.
330?
Sorry. All that is special scheme.
We'll now be talking about crop circles and how that affects the budget.
Do you have any in your open space?
Open space actually increased a lot, Gary,
Did
because
it?
of the footprint that we reduced. It was double sided. We had a building here, a building behind it, and that's how we were able to, we just eliminated one of those two buildings. And that allowed us to push it back away from the road. If you look at what's currently built there, in my opinion, it just seems like it's crowding University Avenue a bit. And so we attempted to minimize that.
What's the footage that increased there?
Uh,
Did it go from what to what?
From on the street side?
On the street side, University Avenue
I
street
believe it
side.
was about 50 feet and we
We're 100
were, I mean, it almost doubled. Without looking at it again, I can't remember. Too many numbers I've been looking at.
One problem the current homeowner association is having is funding their improvements they've already got. If you drive by the clubhouse, you'll see a sign out there sometimes that they're advertising leasing office space out of the clubhouse, which isn't really what was anticipated. But the number of residents there are having trouble paying for that infrastructure. So having additional homeowners there paying into the homeowners' fees will help actually make this financially strong.
You got the garage already underground. Are you gonna be able to utilize that, or are you gonna block it off? Pretty much.
We'll be able to utilize it for some storage for the first floor people.
So the existing garage on the first two buildings, there's a garage door that's on the north end of it. We're gonna access it. That building, that'll come straight out, it'll be open, and it'll come into the roadway, so we'll use that to access part of our parking, and it'll actually make that through loop, so they won't have to drive into their buildings and drive back out the same way. They can go continually through the building.
The south entrance.
The south, there's no underground parking underneath the new building. So it's all above ground with the covered awnings.
You just wall up the. Is there already an open?
We've actually got an exit out of that building. And a little road.
Oh, that goes around,
Brings us
okay.
up and ties us into.
I got you.
connecting walls.
Okay.
So the ground parking will be in front and behind, or where is that?
On the sides.
On the sides, on both sides.
Be on the sides and in the front.
And in front. Because the guys-
So the covered parking will be on the sides, the front won't have any covered parking, it'll just be stalls.
And the front will be burned to mitigate looking at cars. And so we've already covered that issue with on looking at cars. And so that front. So
Could you speak up just a little bit? I'm not sure we're getting you on the recording.
yeah, I was just saying the parking that's in the front, which is not covered, is going to be covered with a berm. And then we put the covered parking stalls on both ends of the building, which pretty much disappear.
So nothing that you're proposing would require a zone change for this project, just an amendment to the original approved proposal.
The development agreement.
The development.
That's what we're changing.
Yeah.
So just as a matter of logistics, so there hasn't been a formal amendment document produced at this point as far as how to amend the development agreement, and that would require council approval in the council meeting. So this is presented for your information, but one possible outcome of this discussion is someone could either make a motion that we've got no interest in amending the development agreement and settle it there, or a motion to direct staff to work with them to come up with an amendment and bring it to a future
I
council.
prefer a motion on either approach.
Right.
A motion would be preferable.
Right.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion that we direct staff to prepare a proposed amendment to the development agreement along the lines of what's been discussed to bring to us at the next, our next meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Gary, any discussion?
Was that work meeting in the council?
Council meeting,
It's August 4th.
August, yeah.
If there's no discussion, I'll call for a vote. Those in favor? That vote is unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it. Good to see you.
Next, we have an item that will be presented by Don Gonzalez, one of our management analysts from redevelopment, on the HUD 5-year consolidated plan and a couple of deadlines that we have coming up.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So to give you a little bit of background, the city receives 2 grants from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG, and the Home Investment Partnerships Program Grant. In order to, these are allocated by formula by HUD. But in order to actually receive the funding, we need to apply for them. And part of the process is creating a consolidated plan. It's a 5-year plan of what we intend to do with the funding we receive from them. We are actually at the beginning of the 5-year plan. We just finished the last 5-year period. And so this is a document. I don't have copies available. It's 180 pages, but it's available electronically through SIA. Today is just to make you aware that the document is there. We have entered a 30-day period comment, which will end on August 4th, which is when this item will go to the council meeting for approval. The document, HUD has made some changes after many years of receiving different kinds of documents from all the entitlement entities that receive this funding. A few years ago, they initiated some steps to standardize the process, eventually landing on a web-based system to receive the same information from everybody. So that's what the document is based on their template from the web system. And it talks about the, we do a market analysis, we do a community needs assessment, and based on those findings, we streamline and find out what we can do to help situations with low income and moderate income citizens. I should mention also that through the home grant, Provo City is a member of the Utah Valley Home Consortium, of which the 2 other members are the City of Orem and Utah County being designated as an urban county receiving CDBG. Through the county, all the other entities in the county that signed on with them through the CDBG interlocal agreement also receive home funding through the county that way. Due to the changes that HUD has implemented, because we are the lead entity for the consortium, we're also the lead entity responsible of the comp plan. That includes the separate plans for Orem and the county. So what you'll see here is just about Provo in the sense of what we do with CDBG dollars, but there's a wider discussion of things happening throughout the county because of our responsibility as the lead entity for the consortium. The locally targeted objectives that we discussed through several meetings last year are part of the document, and it's what guides and leads the use of the funding. And that's found on page 5. Ultimately, I think what will make a little more sense to you will be the first year action plan. And that's found on page 143. And it talks about the amounts that we are receiving for this year and how we're planning to use it. There's a list of projects that have been allocated previous meetings that we had as to how the funding will be used. In a nutshell, that's what this is. Again, this is a preliminary step for the meeting that will take place on August 4th to actually adopt the plan and move on with things. I will be happy to answer any questions that we have this time.
Do you have that in an electronic format?
Yes, it's in Sire.
Oh, is it? Oh, the entire document or just the Provo?
No, I uploaded
Entire
just
document.
now the whole document to Sire, so you'll have to refresh it to see it.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Do you have any specific concerns on this, about this document? Anything that you're concerned about in your situation or position, Provo?
Concerns, not really. It's again, there's a lot of time that was spent in putting a lot of this information together because that's what HUD likes to see, that we look at the big picture of who's in need and what if there are any areas of concentration for minorities or for poverty or any of those things. So that discussion is included in here. So it meets what HUD would like to see, and the analysis in resulting with the projects that we have proposed go line in line, hand in hand. So,
are we committing ourselves in Provo to any more things? I know that there are certain times that we've taken funding from the federal government where we've committed, where things have changed within the community, where economy's gone south, where something's happened, we haven't been able to complete projects. Are we making anything more? Are we committing ourselves to anything harder than we're already at, than where we already are?
No. I believe what you're referring to is a few years ago there were a few projects that went south, in a way because of the economy. The entities that were, the agencies that were helping us with that could not go through with the project, so we looked to do something else. Those projects are, one of them was Liberty Place on the west side of the city. That project is completed. HUD understood our position with that. We kept them appraised of what was happening, and they didn't see any reason for doing anything negative towards us. Another project is on 5th South and 5th West. That is, I would say 90% completed. The Provo City Housing Authority built 4 structures there, three houses, and the Habitat for Humanity is going to be building another one in the next year and a half. But we have satisfied HUD's requirements for those projects. And we have put in place policies that help us as we receive applications from separate recipients in different agencies. We do a risk analysis. We look at the pro forma, a market analysis for the need, and so that we're not in that situation anymore. So.
No other questions? Great. Then Dan will have you go ahead with the next item,
Okay.
which is the reprogramming of the home investment and partnership program funds.
All right. So for that, I do have some handouts. Okay, so the item that we're looking at here has to do with the home program. One of the requirements of the home program is that when an allocation is given to an entitlement entity, that any funding is put under contract within 2 years of that grant agreement being signed, and that with 3 years after that, for a total of 5 years, that funding be completely expended. Something else to consider about the home program is that we're given the opportunity to do loans with the funding we receive from HUD. And we have chosen 99.9% of the funding that we receive is transferred out in the form of loans, either for down payment assistance or for the housing authorities have any projects, there's still monies lent out to them. Different terms based on what the project is. But eventually, when a project is completed, or when somebody that received down payment assistance loan moves from the property or sells the property, they paid back the loan that we gave them. So when that comes back to us, it's called program income. The requirement from home, although they allow us to receive that program income, is that we must expend that program income, which is money that is here in our jurisdiction, before we go and request any more funding for any project in the form of a drawdown from HUD. Typically, year to year, we receive anywhere around $400,000 to $500,000 of program income. And as we have expenditures that are occurring because of the different projects or activities that we're undertaking, when we do the monthly reconciliation, we take into account how much program income was received that month. And we offset the expenditures that we would request from HUD against that program income received. This last year, we received almost $1.1 million in program income, which is a little over 50%, about 55% more than we normally would receive. Also, we had some projects that had been delayed, particularly the two housing authorities had two projects, Housing Authority of Utah County in Springville and Provo City Housing Authority with the St. Francis project that is being finished up here, 200 North. They received funding that was allocated to them a while ago. And because they were seeking low-income housing tax credits, that funding became a little aged. They finally received the low-income housing tax credits they were expecting this last December, and they're both, as I mentioned, underway, and Springville will be completed by early fall, and not too much longer, the Provo City Housing Authority project will be completed. And they have drawn money for the expenditures that they incurred. We also work with an agency, Rural Housing Development Corporation, and this last year they also repaid some loans that they have received. The reason why I mention these things is because they all come into an unusual circumstance. When the funding, sometimes I try to explain it so that I don't get myself confused with it. But the situation is, we are allocated a funding. For the year 2013, we were allocated a little over $1 million. Some of those projects that I mentioned were allocated funding for that year. But as we have used program income to replace the money we would get from HUD, that funding that had been already under contract and almost expended, at that point becomes again free or uncommitted. So the first page of the document that you have there, that report, shows that in order to meet the deadline compliance for 2013 funding, we need to put under contract a total of $2.5 million in change in home funding and almost $200,000 of home children funding. The reason why those amounts are higher than what we actually were allocated on that year is because this is replacing a funding as we use program income from any other years. Does that make sense? I mean, can you understand what I'm saying there? So the point is, we have a total of $2.7 million to allocate. When we looked at this report back in February or March, that number was a little over $300,000. It wasn't that big. But again, because of the expenditures we received and the program income we received, it just kind of blew up. Either way, in order to meet this deadline, we need to have all that money under contract by July 31st. So as soon as we found out about the circumstance, we reached out to agencies that we work with, and some of them passed. But we received a request from Rural Housing Development Corporation, and that I believe is the last document on the panel that I gave you. So they propose to enter in contract with us for those projects for a total of about $2.8 million. The projects are in Salem and 3 in Payson. 3 of them are for development of self-help housing, so single-family housing, and 1 they're proposing for multi-family project in Payson. So that's basically, the document also includes a detail of what projects had the funding replaced by program income. But in essence, the reason for me being here is to propose that we accept the proposal from Rural Housing to enter into contract with them for those $2.8 million. They are qualified charter community housing development organizations, so they can use that almost only contribution. They have been an excellent partner to work with. They always finish their projects on time. To give you an idea, you're familiar with Mazer School and the homes that are built around that. Those homes were built by Rural Housing, and that's the type of project that they built. These again would be in 7 Payson. So, if you have any questions,
when do they plan on starting?
They will start those projects probably in the spring.
So these are immediate things that we want to do in the spring. Are we obligated, once we take these funds, what does Provo City become obligated to do should something happen to them on their project?
The funds we already, I'm trying to understand.
Well, are we obligated to pay those back should something happen to this project?
Every
These
time,
projects.
yes, every time that there's a project, wherever it happens, we would be obligated to pay them back.
And do we take title to the ground or have an interest in the ground as a second?
We always file trust deeds restrictions in any project that we do. So, yeah, we have notes, promissory notes as well that are filed for older projects.
So are we the primary lien holder on this project until they get their construction loans?
I don't know that we would be the primary lien holder. Typically, we're not. Typically, we're in second place. But we have some stake on that. Something to state about the funding here. This is funding that was allocated to the city, and in virtue of the program income that we've seen, we have not used. So if there's no action taken, there's no risk involved. HUD simply would take that money back, and that would be it. One way to look at it could be, since we do make loans and receive program income, in essence, we have used the money from the program income we've received. If we didn't do any program income, we didn't do any loans, and we didn't receive any money, all the money we received, we granted it out, we would not be in this situation, because all the money that we expend would be requested from HUD at that time. So in a way, we kind of use the money, but it's still there available. Any other questions?
It looks like there are not other questions, Dan, so in order to meet your deadline, this will be on tonight's council agenda.
All right. Thank you very much.
So you're welcome. Thank you. Next, we have Bart Simons, discussion on interlocal agreement with various municipalities and political subdivisions within the state of Utah to authorize Provo City to become a member of the Duerden River Farmington Bay Water Quality Council.
I appreciate your time today. To try to put this in a nutshell, there were a couple of options here. One was to try to take 2 to 3 hours worth of presentation, which you don't have that kind of time and the chances of getting into your schedule for that won't meet the time element of where we're at. So I'm going to try to cut to the chase, and if I get to where I'm shortcutting things too much, please stop me. But in essence, there's a couple of hurdles to get over. One of them is the name of the interlocal agreement, Duerden River Farmington Bay. The reason that came up that way, and by the way, I have another document where the heavy talk is we're going to change the name now because of our involvement in Orem Cities and Timpanogos Special Service District, going to something else. But it started as Duerden River Farmington Bay. And what it comes down to is it's really easy in the name of we all want clean water to start throwing out a shotgun approach on what we ought to do certain things for water bodies. And this happened up north, and the Division of Water Quality with the state, and they're trying to make an effort to clean waterways and water impoundments. However, what we're contending is it takes good science-based information to be able to make these decisions. And so what came up with far ahead of us looking at it here is when they started looking at the regulations for Farmington Bay, Great Salt Lake areas, and realized that to make changes in the wastewater treatment plants to reduce specifics of phosphorus and nitrogen, or in the form of total inorganic nitrate, down to levels that they feel like would reduce these nutrient loads enough so they don't form algae blooms. That's what this is all about. To get them to that point, originally it started saying, well, infrastructure improvements might cost $1 million, and then maybe it went to $2 million, and then maybe on up to $10 million. And it's very possible to get out of hand really, really fast on it. And there have been a couple of things thrown out, if you will. One study done years ago on the Provo facility, and also some talk just around the group that indicates that the implications to Provo, if we have to change our facilities and augment them, rebuild them, whatever, to get to these levels of a 1 or less of total phosphorus or a 10 milligram per liter of total inorganic nitrate could run us as high as at least 10 million and maybe $25 million. And now there are other ways to start controlling the phosphorus to get to the 1 part per million. Well, I better cover something else. When you hear me saying that, I slip and interchange them. The reason is milligram per liter and part per million, for all intent and purpose, are the same measurement. So if I slip between the two and talk about milligram per liter, part per million, it's the same thing. Anyway, what we're leading to is, even if we get down to a 1 part per million of phosphorus and a 10 part per million of total inorganic nitrate, the lake and the history of the lake and what it is, if we removed all the treatment plants, it's very likely that it won't make any difference at all in the lake. The algae blooms are going to be there. And the greenish blue algae, the cyanobacteria that brings that on, has been the culprit or been accused of killing the dogs here in the story before. Arguably, there's another side of that some of the scientists are saying absolutely not. And so they're vehement on one side or the other. Anyway, where we're leaning is, well, we're not suggesting that we do nothing. What it comes down to is we want to make sure that whatever costs come forward to Provo and the Provo city citizens are based on good science and good facts, and try to lobby the Division of Water Quality with the state, as is the rest of the Duerden River Farmington Bay group, to get them to look at technology-based standards and to examine that science and for peer review and really take a look at things, not just take the shotgun approach and say, hey, 70% of the problem or more is caused by the effluent from these treatment plants and we have to reduce it. Because again, and it's my own personal belief, that even if we remove the plants completely, it's probably not going to change the lake and what it is. So anyway, having said that, I know that's a lot all at once, but where we're going, you have had the paperwork on. If we join the group, we also have a commitment that all of the monies that we put forward will be spent in Utah County and working with Provo, Orem, Timpanogos Special Service District, and even the ones to the south, to measure various constituents in the lake, particularly phosphorus and nitrate, to see just exactly what consequences are coming from our effluent, mainly from the mill race. And we haven't had anything in this study till now. Our joining this group will now allow, there will be, as we speak, they're ramping up to do extensive studying on the mill race. And so we'll have information now to go back to the Division of Water Quality and say, this is what it really is. And rather than taking these arbitrary limits, let us work to something that's more technology-based and really makes a difference if we're going that way. So we hesitated, and I was at the head of the list to join the group previously, because we didn't know, as we gathered this information, if we wouldn't perhaps turn and go a different direction with it. And the final agreement that we ended up not signing has an opt-out clause in it. And so now the addendum that is before you includes us, Orem City, Timpanogos, and the districts north, basically to join together now and continue rolling to build on this study. And they're not asking us to join them, but it becomes an advantage for us, and there's probably more strength in numbers in dealing with some of the regulations. That's probably a little too shotgun, but.
Art, so then this is basically, it's a study, science group and a lobby to lobby the state.
And probably we'll move forward with the lobby. Yeah, it currently isn't that right now, but I would see that's probably a possibility.
Possibly.
Right. What it is now, and I'm trying hard not to get my own vehement feelings in here, but if I can state this much, in my own opinion, some of what's coming from the staff at the state is somewhat arbitrary, and they don't have all the information they probably should have before spitting out some of these accusations. And now, if we just stepping back with it, $50,000 is a lot of money each year. But if we have to step to, even without augmenting the plant processes, and if we went for the phosphorus just by metal salts, ferric chloride, something like that, to try to deal with this, and then we have to run it through the digester system afterwards, you're looking probably a minimum of $50,000 a year, probably more like $100,000. And that's, so chemically, we might be able to meet, right now we're at about 2 part per million of phosphorus. We probably could get to the one by doing that, but it's not gonna be for a small price. And if we have to meet the levels by changing the plant and the processes of the plant and rebuilding portions of the plant, it's gonna get into large money.
The makeup of the board, I know that as we've done with the Provo Water Board, we want to make sure that you are on that to protect Provo's interests. Who will be on that board? How will that be determined?
On this board?
On this board.
A representative from Provo, or as many of us as we want there at their meetings. Mark Ogren, our plant manager, I'd like there as much as possible. They have plant managers as well as administrative positions like myself that are there trying to pull this together to just the biggest bang for the buck. So that's what, that makeup of the group will be whoever we want in there.
And they'll have voting rights? How will we deal with that?
Yes, it can be vetoed by the majority of the board on any decision that's made. Nobody's gonna walk in and say, this is what we're doing in here. They'll take a vote on everything, and they do now, as to, okay, how do you want to go this way or that way, or what do we do? And then if it got to where it was something we didn't want, we can opt out with a 30-day notice.
The city could opt out?
Yeah, the city could opt out with a 30-day written notice. Now, I would guess, though, with what the value I see in it, there's no way we're going to want to do that. We're going to be very heavily involved with this. If we don't, if I can just suggest that we'll basically then be dealing with doing whatever comes down the pike, and the time to fight against it, if you will, maybe that's the wrong term, but it'll be too late. It'll be over at that point. And what we're hoping to get to is everybody wants clean water, but it's not disingenuous for anyone to come in and say, oh, you want clean water, so we have to do all this, when it may not make any difference at all. And so the monthly bill, I haven't had a chance yet, but I think this is the wrong time to throw it in. But I haven't had a chance to thank Mayor Curtis, Mr. Parker, and this council. They tackled some tough issues here all the time. And probably Mayor Curtis spoke in another group this morning. I was thinking about it. We can argue all day that we should have done some things before, and maybe should have done some upgrades or work more on, but it isn't going to do any good. We've got to go forward and get on top of the issues that we have, and all of you have taken the hard line to be able to move forward on that. I personally appreciate it. This one, whether you vote here on this resolution or not, doesn't matter, whichever way you go. I think this is the way to go. If we don't, we could get our head handed to us when it's all said and done. And we won't have any choice. So that's why we're wanting to join the group now for at least the first year and get at least this information off of the mill race and the tributaries going to the lake and the shoreline areas here that way.
Mr. Chairman, a couple of questions. Bart, we looked at the concept of doing this on our own, just us and Orem or the Utah Lake Commission or others. Can you talk about why we decided to recommend this joining with the larger group?
I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you, Mr. Parker. We had planned on going that way and thought, well, perhaps the strength and numbers would work better by a separate group, having two major groups, one up north and then us here in the south, and move forward. So a couple of the individuals that we wanted to bring in to gain the samples and the expertise we needed, as we started down that road with a couple of meetings, Orem went ahead and quickly joined the JRFD group, and so did Timpanogos. They wanted in there right away. We stayed here hoping to form that group. So as we brought in a couple of the experts that we were planning on in a meeting where, frankly, I was borderline embarrassed, because when they looked at all of the information, I guess I should say embarrassed, when they looked at all of the information, what they could do and where they were going, they turned and said, the first move you feel like you ought to make is join the JRFB group. And they said, now, for another $40,000 on top of that, we can do a balance study and go in and say, oh, heavens. There becomes a point here that, okay, maybe we've not taken the time looking at it that we could. We wanted to take this group and gain the information here originally, and it's more pointed to Mr. Parker's question, without sounding too harsh. Again, Jordan River Farmington Bay didn't really, it wasn't that they didn't want us, but they didn't need us in the group. And so it's like, good. And they were doing all of their sampling to the north and working on everything to the north of the point of the mountain. Well, as it started to expand, I think they also realized that it would serve them better to have information from Utah County as well. So at that point, they threw out even a little feeler at that time here about 6 weeks ago, but we'd sure still love to have you. And that was the first time, instead of we don't need you, you can come if you want, then it was, we'd like to have you join the group. And so after being told by the ones we thought were going to lead the charge here that maybe we ought to go there anyway, that's why we turned and felt like, well, that's the move to make at this point. And I also feel like, and I probably owe this group an apology, I at first was concerned that maybe we wouldn't get what we needed and say, hey, we don't want that kind of a commitment. So I was fighting against this 5-year commitment. And I didn't get a chance to look at this final agreement kind of at the end of that time where they had the opt-out on the number 8. Or maybe we would have done something different at that point. But the concern that we had was to sign on to something that we had no movement. Ms. Sunday, did you have a question I missed?
No, I did, but you answered it. So.
Any other questions at all? I hope it's
All right.
not as much.
Thanks, Bart. We'll see you later this evening. And last, we have a presentation by Bill Pepperoni, a discussion on a request for a zone change in the Franklin neighborhood.
So the zone change from residential conservation to medium density residential and the project plan with the Planning Commission in June, and the Planning Commission recommended denial on the zone change and did deny the project plan. The primary reasons for the recommendation for denial of the zone change were that the Franklin neighborhood plan is in draft form right now. In fact, it's going to be discussed by the Planning Commission tomorrow night. Staff is going to recommend that it be continued because the neighborhood chair has asked it to be continued one more time. But this area of the Franklin plan calls for this area to be low density residential. As we have received input from the neighbors, as we have received input from the neighborhood chair, we haven't received any input suggesting that this area, that the plan calls for becoming low density residential, should become something other than that. So it would seem like that recommendation is probably going to be the one that will come forward to Planning Commission and City Council eventually. The other problem with the zone change to medium density residential is that the MDR zone requires 20,000 square feet as a minimum for a lot size. This project has just over 14,000 square feet. This is 2nd South, and this is 1,000 West. Those are the Franklin Park condominiums. This is the property the city owned and put under contract to Georgetown Development for townhouses to go in, just to orient you to kind of where we are. So for those reasons, the Planning Commission recommended denial on the zone change. On the project plan, there were several deficiencies in terms of meeting minimums of the code. Now, it's my understanding that the property owner has said, well, they're willing to scale back the project. This is a 4-plex that exists now. If we can page through the, or do I have the?
I can go right here.
Thank you. Let's see if we can get to more of a blow up. Yeah, so this is the house that was built back in 1920. This is the 4-plex that was built in 83, I believe. It's my understanding that the developers now said, well, he could look at just making this a duplex instead of 4 new units, 2 units. We'd still have to use the MDR zone because they would be at 17.64 units to the acre. If they had 6 units on this property, the LDR zone caps you at 15 units to the acre. So while dropping that to 2 units reduces quite a bit of the parking that was necessary, and that solves some of the site plan issues, I think we're still going to have the problem of not meeting the minimum lot size for an MDR zone. Okay, that's all I have. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I sure like some redevelopment on that old house. How are we going to do that, Bill? How are we going to get some changes in that, upgrade that?
Well, that 20,000 square feet is in the ordinance. So if if you want to amend that, that is something you could look at. The reason we put in 20,000 square feet was to require people to assemble parcels so that we could have something more meaningful and not people going in on one lot and doing something that was so small that it wasn't a lot of benefit to the neighborhood. For that reason, the LDR zone only requires 10,000 square feet to redevelop. And this lot is 14,000. But the MDR zone, we bumped that up to 20,000 square feet.
How old is the fourplex?
The fourplex was built in '83 under the old medium density residential zone, which was called the R3 zone.
Bill? What would their options be if that was changed to the LDR zone? What could they do with the old house?
Because of that density limit and the size of their property, I don't think they can get more than one more unit. I don't think they can do more than 5 units on the entire property and be within the density constraints of the LDR zone. I guess one thing you could do is you could rezone the property to the old R3 zone, which doesn't have as stringent of requirements as the MDR zone. Again, that would put a density on the property that would be at odds with the recommendation that's going to come forth on the neighborhood plan. But the old R3 zone is still on the books.
Does the R3 connect right there to the zone?
If we can back out to the zone map again, I think this was an SD zone 2.5 R25 PD, R25 PD. So that was written just for this site. I haven't even looked at whether this zone, if it extended across the street, what that would allow. That's an option I just hadn't thought of until you said that, Sam.
Have you been on site and looked at that house?
Yes.
The owners say it's just ready to go. Is it that bad? Is there nothing that you do done to restore the house? Or is it just the location is just not conducive to someone wanting to spend that kind of money to redevelop?
I think it's a combination of it having now fallen into a state of disrepair where bringing it back is going to cost as much as doing something drastically different. Unfortunately, we've run into that occasionally around where people intentionally allow their property to deteriorate and then say, well, city, you really need to help me with some kind of zone change or some other mechanism because it's now going to cost so much to bring it back. I think you as a council had seen that before on a property in Joaquin. So unfortunately, we run into that occasionally.
Just rather than leave a deteriorated house next to a fourplex, would it make sense to accommodate something that it can be developed, not be a dump, scary place?
Well, NeighborWorks and the Housing Authority have both gone onto properties like this, and through their funding and their mechanisms, they've helped to remodel the house and refurbish it, and have helped in situations like this. Whether this is eligible for that, I would certainly think it is. In the neighborhood it's in the Franklin neighborhood, I think they're eligible for those funds. I think those are options that could be looked at. NeighborWorks and the Housing Authority.
So just to review, the fourplex absolutely doesn't fit on the square footage. And with the duplex that they're thinking about, still doesn't meet the square footage of the lot.
Yeah, so in order to do the duplex, we probably look at whether or not bringing this zone across the street would allow that to happen.
Maybe that would be the best option for them to look at and apply to do that.
My suspicion is that R25, that 25 coincides to their density. So that would give you more density than what they're asking for in that, with that twin home. The benefit of the twin home is that, like I said, it gets rid of enough of the parking. If we go to the site plan, is that loaded in here? That gets rid of enough of the parking that really helps. You can see that this plan, there's the existing building, there's the new one. By the time you put in 2 fourplexes, the entire back of the property is paved. This is exactly the type of thing that in other areas the city council has told us, please don't do that. So by getting rid of the number of spaces that would be needed for those other 2 units, that helps that issue. So I'm happy to meet with the property owner and look at what mechanisms could possibly be employed to facilitate a duplex there, if that seems like it's something that council's have been minded to.
All right, thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.
And we'll watch for this agenda in 2 weeks, to this item on our agenda in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
So I meant to say last item now, administrative updates, if there are any.
We'll say
Mayor? Oh, okay. I think that's
whatever
what I
was there
thinking.
is good.
One of these days you'll have some. All right, then I will look for a motion to adjourn our work session. Kelly, and a second by Kim. Those in favor? Great. All right, thank you.